Chapter 1159. After Li Zheng and the others followed Yuan Tianxing in, they all knew what this place was and knew that these people in military uniforms were zombies. Other than Feng Mingyu, the others were still calm. Feng Mingyu shrunk behind the tall Lei Yao and carefully followed them in. Do you need to be like this? Don't you feel embarrassed? What are you afraid of? They're our comrades now. They won't rush out and pounce on you. Look at how scared you are. Lin Yu said to him as if he couldn't stand it anymore. Shush. Lower your voice. What if they hear you and get angry? Feng Mingyu immediately turned his head and raised his finger at him to shut him up. He was afraid. There was no other way. Actually, he wasn't afraid of anything else but their eyes. The eyes of the zombies were overflowing with black, like two black holes, as if they were going to suck people in. And after being sucked in, he didn't know what was inside, as if he would be drowned and suffocated to death. Anyway, he was afraid of those eyes. When he watched the apocalyptic movies, he didn't even dare to look at the eyes of the zombies in the movies. He didn't expect the real world to be even scarier. After watching for so many years, he still hadn't gotten used to it. I'm really speechless. Other people are afraid of zombies because they are afraid that they will attack and eat humans. Now, many of these people here had recovered their human memories and some of their humanity. Is there need to be so afraid? Speaking of which, our leader is really amazing. He can even help them recover their memories. Lin Yu said, and suddenly began to worship his leader again. Feng Mingyu moved closer to him and carefully looked at the zombie soldiers passing by. He whispered, "That's true, but I can't do anything even if I'm afraid. I don't care if it's embarrassing or not. I can't control myself anymore. Let's go. Just as he was about to push Lin Yu forward, he suddenly felt his collar being pulled by someone, and then a force pulled him back. Ahoo! Feng Mingyu's collar was suddenly pulled by someone from behind. She immediately screamed out of reflex and turned her head. He saw a white-haired old man with a pair of black eyes and a pair of golden eyes smiling as he pulled his collar. "Brat, you two are speaking so loudly. We all heard you." Old man Guo's wrinkled face is smiling at the two of them with his eyes narrowed into slits. When Feng Mingyu saw this pair of eyes, she was shocked. She screamed and jumped on Lin Yu. She hugged him like a koala and shouted, "Aha!" Countless soldiers passing by or standing guard immediately turned their heads in unison, staring at him with a pair of zombie black eyes. Lin Yu, who was being hugged like a pillar, Yuan Tianxing and Li Zheng, who were walking in front, were also shocked by his high-pitched scream. They turned around and were speechless. Then he said, "Old Mr. Guo, I'll leave them to you to train." With that, he turned around and left. Feng Mingyu was in disbelief as she watched Yuan Tianxing leave. "Boss, help. It was too cruel. Why did they have to hand him over to an old zombie?" Lin Yu turns around speechlessly and lowers his head to Master Guo politely. "Sorry, old sir. I was rude just now." Old man Guo smiles at him. You're very calm. "This brat is very interesting. Come on, Grandpa will take you out to train your courage. How can you be so timid? You've been in the apocalypse for so many years. How can you be afraid of zombies?" Feng Mingyu wants to cry, but he doesn't dare to look at his eyes. He can only continue to hug Lin Yu and look up and down. This. I can't do anything about it." Lin Yu raised his hand and grabbed his hand, trying to pull him away. He viciously roars at him. "All right, let go of me. You're so heavy. Why are you clinging to me? You're so ugly. Get off me. Bro, don't go. What if I have a heart attack if you leave?" Feng Mingyu put down his leg after hearing what he said, but he doesn't let go, still clinging to him. Lin Yu suddenly regrets talking to this brat. Li Zheng turned around and glanced behind him. One was holding onto his collar and refusing to let go. One was clinging on to him and refusing to let go, and the other was desperately trying to push him away like a piece of sticky candy. It's funny and embarrassing. Old man Guo puts his face in front of Feng Mingyu and looks at him with big eyes. "Are you scared? Very scared?" Feng Mingyu sees his face coming over. He immediately turns his face away and closes his eyes, not daring to look at him. He says, "Sorry, old sir." Aye. Lin Yu struggles for a while and finds that he can't pull this bastard off. He can only stand there and roll his eyes, then says to the old man, "Old sir, it's our fault. Please be magnanimous and don't argue with us. This brat may be sick in his heart and has given up treatment. If you scare him like this, he will really faint later." Old man Guo glances at Lin Yu and then loosens Feng Mingyu's collar. Then, Feng Mingyu immediately leaped out of Lin Yu's body and disappeared outside the military camp's gate in a flash, leaving Old Man Guo and Lin Yu quietly looking at each other. When the sky turned dark, Yuan Tianxing immediately looked out of the window. He is waiting for the signal from Elmarch. Sure enough, Elmar appears not long after. They didn't come back. They continue to move forward. According to last night's itinerary, they will walk another 10 kilometers today. In 10 days, they will reach the range of the rat nest in the zoo. I really hope that's where they are going. Elmar comes in and says to him. Yuan Tianxing hears this and nods. Since they didn't come back, then let's go down now. Let's move. After seeing the people sent by Elmar, Yuan Tianxing slightly turns his head to look at Elmarch. He seems to be asking why she also sent this old man down. Why are you looking at her? I want to go down myself. I want to see something new. Old man Guo stands next to him, one hand behind his back, the other hand stroking his beard. He says with a smile. Everyone looks at him speechlessly. Does this old man want to go down and play? His personality is really like a child's. Even if you look serious, you can't hide the fact that there's a naughty kid living in your heart. Yuan Tianxing looks at Elmar again. Elmar shrugs and says, "Let the old man go down with you, and these are all level 5 earth and metal element leaders. If something happens underground, it will be easier to deal with it." "Okay, thank you." Yuan Tianxing nods to her, then turns around and gets in the car. An off-road vehicle and a small military truck carry 20 to 30 people and zombies out. They set off towards the entrance of the underground cave. Chapter 1160. When they were near the entrance, Yuan Tianxing and the others got off the car and walked to the edge of the cave. The cave was more than 10 meters wide. Using the flashlight, they could see that the sloping ground led to the bottom. It was dark down there. Yuan Tianxing and the others hung gas masks on their waists and then walked down fully armed. The gas mask was to prevent the possibility of poisonous gas in the underground cave. Everyone looked left and right and walked down cautiously. The light from the flashlight shone into the cave, and they walked forward while looking at their surroundings. Old Man Guo walked at the back, and he followed behind the others. He used his hands to touch the walls of the cave, and his eyes carefully observed the surroundings. Yuan Tianxing also looked carefully at the surrounding walls, ceiling, and ground. He found that the walls and ceiling of the cave were very rough, and there were even a lot of claw marks. Only the ground was relatively smooth, maybe because the creatures had walked on it. After walking for more than half an hour, Yuan Tianxing looked at the simple map that Elmar had drawn for him. Soon they entered the big arched hole on the map, and there were many holes around. Elmar had told Yuan Tianxing about the situation in the cave before he came down and told them to go to the biggest hole, so they wouldn't get lost so easily. The cave was so quiet that no sound could be heard. Apart from their own footsteps and talking, there was no other sound. Damn, these gorillas can really dig holes. Are they mice? Or rabbits? They don't look like them. Why do they look like gorillas? Lin Yu stood in the huge round hole and looked at the 7 or 8 holes around him and said in surprise, "Their claws can even cut through metal easily, so digging holes is not a problem at all. But living underground for a long time without seeing light, no wonder their eyes have degenerated. I heard that they had eyes on their faces when they were brought back for experiments, but they were covered by their eyelids." Li Zheng took the flashlight and shone around. Then he asked Yuan Tianxing, "Which way?" Yuan Tianxing pointed to the biggest hole here. Everyone continued to walk into the cave. Feng Mingyu stuck close to Lin Yu with a vigilant face. His attention was not on the strange cave, but on the other zombies that came down with him. Although he told himself not to look at them, he couldn't help but look at their movements from the corner of his eyes, especially the old man who scared him before. At this time, Lin Xiao had collected a lot of energy cores from level 6 and 7 mutant beasts and plants. She had also caught a few level 6 zombies and was now chasing a level 7 zombie. She killed the ones with too much blood and only caught the ones with less blood. As for this level 7 Sandstorm Zombie King, Lin Xiao planned to kill it. Because of his blood and hostility, the smell of his body was so strong that it could be smelled from hundreds of meters away. I can guarantee that the leader wants to kill him because he stinks. Yin Xiao, who was in the same group as Jing Yin, said as she watched Tornado's sand fight with Lin Xiao from afar. She said that she had been sent to the side to watch the fight. After all, the opponent was a level 7 adept. 5th and 6th level adepts like them wouldn't be able to do anything. This level 2 King's ability was sand. He could turn mud into quicksand, and he could even create sand tornadoes that connected to the sky. Jing Yin stood on a rock at the side and watched as Lin Xiao waved his hand. A huge black flame transformed into a huge black dragon and charged towards the yellow sand tornado. Bang! It was directly smashed into pieces, and sand and dust immediately scattered all over the sky. This level 2 zombie probably eats a lot of humans. The smell of blood is too strong. Jing Yin lifted her head slightly, her face expressionless as she watched the dust fly. If it's a human, then it must be from Sunfire. These two bases were the closest to each other in the northwest. I'm guessing it used to be around Sunfire or Hidden Cloud City. It must have been attracted by the level 9 Adept cores in Green Mountain Base. Jing Yin said. Lin Xiao covered his mouth and nose and quickly flashed into the space. Only then was he able to avoid being blown up by the sandstorm caused by the sandstorm. She squinted at the level 2 King's movements and saw that it was trying to escape. However, it was blocked by Yi Qingxian, OL6, and MO. Although the three of them blocked its way, they couldn't do anything to it. The level 2 zombie quickly broke the green vines that Yi Qingxian had released and used a large amount of sand to wrap around Yi Qingxian's vines. The earth wall that Old Six had set up was easily crushed by the sand cones formed by the opponent. Mo's body flashed, and he shot several metal spears at the level 2 king. Fortunately, this was a small town, and there were many metal and mechanical objects that she could use. However, the level 7 zombie dodged Mo's spear with just a flash of its body. Lin Xiao disappeared from the dimension and flew towards the level 7 zombie. In the blink of an eye, she appeared in front of it and reached out to grab its neck. The level 7 zombie's face was hideous, and the flesh on its lips had all fallen off, revealing 2 rows of gums. Its teeth were covered in reddish-brown blood, but they still shone with a cold light. The corners of its mouth were split open to the edges of its face. Its nose had been cut in half, and its eyes were black, like a ghost's. Lin Xiao extended his hand and accurately grabbed his neck. Then, he revealed himself and quickly inserted his other hand into the second grade king's skull. Then, with a push of his hand, he sliced off his skull. Roar! The level 2 king screamed, and then lost all resistance. The top of its skull was cut off by Lin Xiao, and it couldn't be more dead. Lin Xiao dug out the core, and then took out a cup of water to soak it in, and then washed it. All right, it's about time to find them. Lin Xiao threw the core into the dimension, and then poured the water out of the cup. Yi Qingxian and the others flashed to her side, and Lin Xiao took them to the road and threw out the car. They drove towards the direction of the cliff, and on the way, they could directly go to Qingshan Base. When they reached the intersection at the bottom of the cliff, Lin Xiao jumped on top of the car and roared towards the mountain. The big black panther, who was lying on the tree with its eyes closed, suddenly opened its eyes and then stood up and jumped down. Let's go. The leader and the others are at the bottom of the mountain. Duan Wan and Shui Mingjun, who were not far from the tree, turned their heads and looked at him. They immediately packed their things and prepared to leave. Chapter 1161. When the three of them were ready, they turned around and saw that Yin Huiguang had already disappeared. His aura was heading in Lin Xiao's direction. There was a highway under the mountain range where the cliff was located, but it was more than 10 kilometers away from the cliff. However, the highway was covered with sand and dust, and there were some abandoned zombie cars on the side of the road. Lin Xiao and the others parked the car on the side, waiting for Duan Wan and the others to come over. At the same time, they sensed the direction of Sikong Chen's aura to see if he was still hiding nearby. After a while, several air-piercing sounds could be heard. Lin Xiao turned his head and saw Yin Huiguang appear in front of him. After a while, Lin Kuei, Shui Mingjun, and the other two arrived. Let's go to Qingshan Base and see what it looks like. Lin Xiao asked them to get in the car and continued to drive in the direction of Qingshan Base. There was no need for a guide. Lin Xiao just needed to follow the aura of Blue Land. In her space, there were a few level 6 zombies thrown on the grassland where the sheep were grazing, looking around in confusion. When they saw each other, they bared their teeth like wild beasts, warning each other not to come close. They were all attracted by the energy core of a level 9 metahuman. They had seen the state of a metahuman when they went crazy, and they knew what would happen to them. If they continued to go crazy, they would enter a particularly weak state when their energy was almost exhausted. So they came with the mentality of picking up scraps. If they could snatch this level 9 energy core, it would be a big profit. However, they did not expect the competition to be so fierce and the opponents to be so strong. Not to mention the number of level 7 mutant beasts, zombies, and metahumans. There were even a lot of level 8 metahumans. And there was also the existence of a level 8 zombie emperor. Because of Lin Xiao's existence, the zombie emperor's aura was too terrifying. So these zombies finally retreated far away and did not go forward. In the end, they did not expect that the zombie emperor would come after them. They could not escape even if they wanted to, and they could not hide even if they wanted to. If they wanted to fight, forget it. Under the powerful aura of 2 levels higher, the level 6 zombies who had evolved a lot of intelligence were terrified. Then they were taken away obediently. After being brought into this space, they felt that they were completely suppressed. They each kept a safe distance and looked around anxiously, as well as the lake that made them feel oppressed. At this time, more than a dozen level 1 or 2 gorillas were lying together in the space forest, sleeping soundly. They had been starving for many days. Although they could smell the scent of food outside the forest, they couldn't find the way out of the forest. They could only wander around aimlessly. They could not even chew the trees here. They climbed up to pick leaves, but they found that the leaves were not good. They could only crawl on the trees to eat, and they found that the leaves were not good. Roar! A tiger's roar came from the back of the building, and a half-grown tiger cub jumped out with a piece of wet meat in its mouth. It dragged the meat into the grass nearby and began to eat it. In one of the small spaces behind the building, Lin Xiao had placed buckets filled with bear and wolf meat. At this moment, the lid of one of the buckets had been opened, revealing the water and meat inside. However, the water in the bucket seemed to have been drunk, and there was a lot less meat. While eating the bear meat, it looked at the herd of mutant sheep and roe deer across the lake. It found that there were more newborn sheep and roe deer. When it was injured and recuperating here, there were always people who gave it food. But recently, it didn't know why the previous keepers were all gone. It felt that there were fewer breaths in this space. Looking at the new human breaths, the little tiger stuck out its tongue and licked its mouth. Then it buried its head in the meat. While eating, it looked up at the sky. Author, did you forget about me? You only let me out now. You always let those 3 out to play, but not me. Come out. I want to play too. Lin Xiao seemed to feel the resentment coming from the space and smiled. In fact, she had sent people to take care of this little guy. Lu Qianni had been taking care of it before, but now that Lu Qianni was not in the space, she let the others out. It seemed that this little guy was lonely. But Lin Xiao didn't plan to let it out now. He would wait until they reached Qingshan Base. After driving for 3 hours, they finally reached Qingshan Base. It was located in a remote town in the territory. No wonder no one knew about their base for so long. It's in this place. Looking around, there were some lush hills. It was desolate and uninhabited. There were also many zombies moving around. Just as Lin Xiao and the others were about to arrive, Hudaba anxiously ran to Lan Lu and yelled at him. Lan Lu was confused by his sudden shout. He turned to Chong Qingqing and asked her, "What did Daba say?" Chong Qingqing said, "He said that a very powerful zombie is coming towards us, and its level is much higher than him." Hudaba nodded vigorously. Lan Lu thought for a moment. His eyes flashed and asked him, "Then do you see if there are many more high-level zombies around her? Maybe the female leader of the base is coming." Hearing this, Hudaba was stunned. Roar. Lan Lu looked at Chang Qingqing. Chang Qingqing helped him translate. He said that it's a level 8 zombie emperor. Oh right, that female leader is indeed at level 8. She said the last sentence to Hudaba. Hudaba looked at Chang Qingqing with a surprised expression. He didn't expect that female zombie to level up so quickly. He turned around and walked out, but after a while, he ran back and hurriedly roar. Chang Qingqing was stunned when she heard his roar, then turned to look at Lan Lu. She asked, "Is there another zombie emperor with that female zombie?" Lan Lu was also stunned, then said with a blank expression, "No, the zombies that appeared with her were all level 5 or 6. There wasn't even a level 7. Where did the other zombie emperor come from?" Hudaba roared at him again. Roar. Chang Qingqing looked at Lan Lu and said, he sensed the aura of 2 zombie emperors, and they are coming this way. Lan Lu stood up and walked to the window, then carefully sensed outside and said, "Why do I only feel the energy of a zombie emperor? This is Miss Lu. I don't feel the other one." Hudaba roared at him with a straight face. Roar. Chang Qingqing continued to translate. He said that he sensed it with the energy of the same kind, so that the range is larger. Hudaba was only level 6. If he sensed the energy of the same kind, the range would be much smaller. But if he sensed the energy of the same kind, he could sense it further. Chapter 1162. When he heard Lan Lu say that he only saw one level 8 zombie, Hudaba became nervous. Then who was the other one? Are you saying that the 2 level 8 zombie emperors came together? Lan Lu frowned and asked Hudaba. Hudaba nodded. Lan Lu rubbed his chin and pondered. He only sensed the aura of the female zombie leader, but he didn't feel the aura of the other zombie emperor. However, Hudaba wouldn't lie to him. Since what he said was true, then who was the other zombie emperor? Could it be that there were other zombie emperors around the female zombie that they didn't know about? If that's the case, then this woman isn't simple. Who would dare to provoke a base with 2 zombie emperors? Even China would have to think twice before doing so. But we didn't feel the aura of the other zombie emperor. Wait a minute. Chang Qingqing was about to say something, but her expression suddenly changed. She and Lan Lu looked at each other. A powerful aura suddenly appeared and began to spread. Lan Lu frowned. This zombie emperor's aura? I know it. As soon as he said this, Chang Qingqing and Hudaba immediately stared at him. They were waiting for him to say who it was. That's right, it's the lightning-type zombie emperor that attacked China last time. Lan Lu looked at the 2 of them and replied, "That lightning zombie." Chang Qingqing didn't react. Lan Lu suddenly thought of something and said, did he suddenly disappear last time? So it was this female zombie who secretly brought it into the space. Chang Qingqing asked doubtfully, "Did she save the zombie emperor? Didn't you say that there was something wrong with the zombie emperor at that time?" Lan Lu nodded. Yes. Chang Qingqing lowered her head and thought for a moment before saying, "So that's how it is. No wonder his aura isn't that strong. Right? Why did Miss Lu come here? She wouldn't be looking for your level 8 energy core so soon, right?" Lan Lu, "It shouldn't be." Chang Qingqing shrugged and said, "Is it possible that she just came to say hello or drink some tea?" Lan Lu, "You'll know when you get there." At this time, Lin Xiao parked the car a few kilometers away from the Qingshan base. He first went into the space to bring out the tiger. She stood in front of the small building and looked at the little tiger that was hiding behind the small building. It stuck its big round head out from behind the wall and looked at her with its face tilted. He waved at it. "Come on, didn't you want me to take you out to play? But you've already grown up. You should go out and learn how to hunt. Go out and let that stupid dog take you for a walk." Roar, roar. Actually, the tiger was already a year old, but its body was not very big. It cautiously barked at Lin Xiao twice. The people outside the space didn't know why Lin Xiao suddenly stopped and ran into the space. In any case, they were almost at the Qingshan base. Why didn't they just go over? But since she had stopped, something must have happened. Not long after, the zombies felt the aura of another zombie emperor and immediately understood what was going on. It seemed that Lin Xiao was waiting for him. Lin Xiao was playing with the little tiger in the space. Are you coming over? If you don't come over, I'll leave. Don't you want to go out to play? Woo-woo, the little tiger bared its teeth at her and turned its head away. It didn't want to go out now. Lin Xiao was speechless as she looked at the big cat's arrogant face. Then she walked over helplessly. Okay, it's my fault that I didn't have time to accompany you, okay? Come over. When she saved this guy, it was still a small ball. Now it was as big as a medium-sized dog. Thinking about it, it had been a year. But you're already a year old. Why are you growing so slowly? Other people's bodies would grow several times longer after mutation. Why did it shrink when it came to yours? Your parents weren't small at that time. Lin Xiao looked at it carefully and murmured in surprise. The little tiger obviously didn't understand what she said, but it could understand Lin Xiao's eyes. Was she looking down on it? Feeling that Lin Xiao was looking down on it, the little tiger immediately became angry. It jumped out from behind the wall and roared fiercely at Lin Xiao. It wasn't afraid of Lin Xiao coming closer. Hey, why are you so fierce? You can't beat me. Lin Xiao walked over and waved her hand in front of the little tiger's eyes. Just as the beast was about to bite her, she grabbed its waist and hugged it. Woo! The little tiger immediately struggled and wanted to get down from Lin Xiao's body. But Lin Xiao hugged it and flashed out of the space. Ow, ow! A tiger roared, and all the zombies turned to look. Hey, the leader finally let this little guy out. Xiaodong saw the little thing and immediately came over. He reached out to touch the tiger's head. Ow! The little tiger immediately turned its head angrily and bit his hand. Hey, it's quite fierce. Xiaodong quickly pulled his hand back. Lin Xiao looked around and said, That guy hasn't arrived yet? Everyone looked at each other and shrugged. He shrugged and said, It looks like he doesn't plan to go with us. After waiting for a while, the aura didn't come closer. The other party probably didn't want to go with them. Lin Xiao threw the little tiger in her arms and said, Since he doesn't want to come, then forget it. Wang, come here. As she spoke, she suddenly raised her head and called out to her butt face. Woof! A big black dog leaped out from the roof of a nearby house and stood there, looking down at Lin Xiao. But the next second, it immediately looked at the orange cat next to her. Wang became excited when it saw the little tiger. It jumped down and rushed in front of the little tiger. As a result, the little tiger was so scared that all its fur stood up, and it bared its teeth and growled. Wang couldn't hide its aura at this moment. The level 6 zombie dog's aura made the little tiger nervous, and it subconsciously roared at it. But Wang didn't care at all. It excitedly swung its tail and ran around the little tiger. Take it away and play with it. But remember to take care of its safety. Lin Xiao saw Wang's inexplicable excitement, so he kicked its butt and said to him. At this time, there was a big snake hanging down from the roof of another house. The snake opened its eyes and looked at the little tiger. It stuck out its tongue twice and then retracted its tongue. Woof! Wang immediately turned its head and barked happily at Lin Xiao. Then it turned its head and bit the soft skin on the back of the little tiger's neck and carried it away. Roar! The little tiger let out a reluctant roar when it was picked up by the little tiger, but its body was very obedient. It curled up into a ball with its tail between its legs and was carried away by Wang. Chapter 1163. When Lin Xiao and the others arrived at the entrance of Qingshan Base, they saw that there was already someone waiting there. The person waiting for them was none other than Lan Lu himself. Lan Lu's eyes flashed when he saw Lin Kuei, Yin Huiguang, and the others behind Lin Xiao. He took another look at Yin Huiguang. He appeared with this female zombie. It seemed that she had really solved the problem of the information being leaked. He smiled and welcomed Lin Xiao. I didn't think that you would come here. Why didn't you say anything before coming? I thought you would leave after taking care of the Black Wolf King. Lin Xiao knew that he was just being polite. She smiled and said, This is your territory. I would have come to say hello if I wanted to leave. Besides, are you saying that you don't welcome me? When Lan Lu heard the last sentence, he knew that she was joking. He waved his hand and led them inside. How is that possible? It's just that the conditions here are a bit crude. I was afraid that you wouldn't like it. But since you're here, please come in. If you knew that I was here to collect debts, I don't know if you would still welcome me. When will you give me my level 8 energy core? Lin Xiao said with a smile as she led them inside. When they approached the gate of their base, Lin Xiao and the others' expressions were a bit strange. I say, since you guys have built a base here, at least get rid of the words mental hospital. After seeing the words Qingshan mental hospital, Lin Xiao was speechless as she complained to Lan Lu. The people who followed Lin Xiao and looked at Lan Lu and the others with a look of agreement. After hearing what she said, Lan Lu looked at the words and coughed awkwardly. He coughed awkwardly and explained, Ahem, that, because we were planning to find another place to build a base. We didn't plan on staying here for long. That's why we didn't take it to heart. It's just that we didn't find a suitable place, so we forgot about it and didn't care about it later. Lin Xiao looked at him with a strange expression. I always felt that we came to a place that we shouldn't have come to. You happen to be a psychic. Speaking of which, were you a patient here before? Lan Lu looked at her with a choked expression. Seeing his expression, Lin Xiao smiled. Oh, looks like I was right. Lan Lu was speechless. He would never tell her that most of the people who awakened their abilities were patients. After entering the Qingshan base, Lan Lu invited them to sit down in the reception room. Speak. Since he transferred the money to us, he's definitely not here to collect on his debt. Is there anything related to our base? After sitting down, Lan Lu smiled at Lin Xiao and asked. Of course, he did not believe what Lin Xiao had just said. After all, he was a spiritual type. Since this female zombie came here, there must be something. And if you head northwest from here, it's about 200 kilometers away from here, close to the border. Something has appeared over there. It's best if you send someone over to keep an eye on it, but don't get too close. These monsters crawled out from the depths of the earth, and their bodies carried a very strong corrosive acid gas. The area they appeared in was about 10 kilometers wide. The vegetation had withered, and the ground was pitch black. It had now become a dead zone. Those things eat corroded corpses, zombies too. Lin Xiao's expression became serious as she said to Lan Lu. Hearing her say this, Lan Lu felt that the situation was indeed very serious. It didn't seem like she was joking. His heart sank. Monster? What kind of monster? Lin Xiao thought of the eyes and felt a chill on the back of her neck. She said, And it's a monster that's 2 to 3 meters long. Its head is round and the size of a water basin, but there are many eyes on its head. It only has 2 feet like front claws. The body on the back is flat and soft like a leech or a slug. Anyway, it looks very disgusting. When everyone heard her description, a round head full of eyes and a flat and soft body on the back, they all felt uncomfortable. After thinking about it, they all felt bad. Why would such a thing suddenly appear? Lan Lu looked at Lin Xiao in confusion. Lin Xiao thought about it and said, I think there might be a world that we don't know about in the depths of the earth. Apart from the monsters we saw on your side, there was also a strange creature that appeared not too long ago. They don't have eyes, but they look very similar to gorillas. But they're much bigger than the ones we saw on your side, and those things are very aggressive. Fortunately, they still have a weakness. But for the monsters on your side, I'll leave it to you to find their weakness. I'm a little worried about the situation of the monsters on my side. Will there be any strange changes? Before she saw those multi-eyed monsters, she had a bad feeling in her heart. After seeing those multi-eyed monsters, she began to worry about whether the situation of Dezhuang and the others had also changed. What she meant was to tell Lan Lu that she wouldn't be staying here any longer. There are even monsters on your side. Do you think they have something in common? Is there a connection? Lan Lu asked her after thinking for a while. If there's something in common, it's probably that they're all creatures that have never been seen in the world and that they came from underground. There's nothing else. Lin Xiao thought about it and replied. Hearing her say this, Lan Lu said, All right, I'll send someone to observe the situation. Now that there's 1 and 2, I'm wondering if there will be such unknown creatures in other areas. Why would these things suddenly appear? If that's the case, I can't help but feel that there's a threat coming from underground. His senses had always been very sharp, and after hearing Lin Xiao say that there was more than one type of unknown creature, he felt a little uneasy. Lin Xiao looked at him and nodded in agreement. I feel the same way. I think we need to find out if any of the other bases have discovered this. After discussing this matter with Lan Lu, Lin Xiao didn't stay in Qingshan base for long. Very quickly, he brought his people out of the mental hospital. Wang and the others, who were playing outside the base with the tiger cub, sensed Lin Xiao's aura and left the Qingshan base where there were many human auras. After leaving the base, they immediately chased after Lin Xiao. The tiger cub didn't look like it had grown up, but its aura wasn't weak. At least level 3 mutant beasts and zombies weren't a threat to it anymore, unless it met level 4 or above. When Lin Xiao saw them on the road, not far from Qingshan base, he saw the tiger cub lying on Mushroom's head and laughed. What's wrong with you guys? Or did the two of you get despised by the kitten? Lin Xiao looked at Mushroom, who had half a tiger on its head, and then looked at the other two. Dahe glanced coldly at Lin Xiao, then walked away. Only Wang barked a few times at the tiger cub lying on Mushroom's head. Oh, well, the tiger cub calmly opened its mouth and called out. Chapter 1164. Lin Xiao and the others were driving on the road. From time to time, there would be a huge black snake slithering through the forest, and from time to time, a big black dog jumping from left to right of the road. Behind the caravan, there was a huge mushroom that was more than a meter tall with a tiger on its head. Below it, there were a few legs made of roots that were swinging as it chased after them. It seemed to be running very happily. Shui Mingjun looked at the big mushroom behind them and said with a curious face, "Your leader really accepts all kinds of pets. It seems that zombies are normal for her." Yi Qingxian, who was at the side, also stuck her head out to look behind and nodded in agreement. Yes, the weirdest thing is this big mushroom. It's so smart. By the way, why does the tiger like this big mushroom? It doesn't want to come down. The highway they were on was a highway, so the speed of the car was more than 123. But this speed was still very slow for those level 6 mutant animals and plants. On the way, Lin Xiao didn't stop to hunt other mutant beasts and mutant plants. He didn't stop when he passed by the city either. He kept going back to Huadong at high speed. It was close to midnight, and at this time, Yuan Tianxing and the others had already been in the cave for a few hours. They walked around the empty cave for a few hours before they found the river that Elmar mentioned. They shone the flashlight into the water, and it was really dark. Yuan Tianxing sniffed and didn't smell anything. He looked at the others and asked, "Do you guys smell anything in the water?" Li Zheng and the others shook their heads. Only the old man and the other zombies stared at the river thoughtfully. Yuan Tianxing saw them like this and knew that they felt something strange. So he went to the old man and asked, "Did you find anything?" Old Gua was a metal type, so he didn't have much sensitivity to the energy in the water. But his nose smelled a strange smell. He said, "I don't feel anything from the energy in the water, but this smell is a bit abnormal. At least I haven't smelled this on land, and it's very pungent." "What? You don't smell it?" After saying that, he looked at Yuan Tianxing with doubt. Yuan Tianxing shook his head and looked at the others. "What about you guys?" Li Zheng and the other humans sniffed seriously and then shook their heads in unison. "I don't smell anything. Maybe it's because our noses are more sensitive." Lu Feng, you have the special ability of water. Did you feel anything? He turned to look at a level 5 zombie next to him and asked. Lu Feng was the only zombie with water ability. He was a fat middle-aged man, and he was also one of the level 5 zombies who had awakened their memories. He heard Oldman was name being called. He immediately stretched out his hand and carefully sensed the river for a while before roaring at the old man. Gizergua frowned and asked, "Are you sure?" Lu Feng nodded. Only then did Oldman Gua turn his head to explain to Yuan Tianxing. He said that there's a bad substance in the water and advised everyone not to touch it. As for what substance was in the water and how it would react if he touched it, he couldn't tell. He just felt that it was dangerous. But I believe that if even we feel that it's dangerous, then it's even more dangerous for you. Are there any living creatures in the river? Yuan Tianqing suddenly looked at Lu Fang and asked. Lu Fang shook his head, indicating that he didn't feel any signs of living creatures in the water. Yuan Tianqing nodded and turned to the others. If that's the case, then let's take some water back and let someone study it. Lu Fang, you have the special ability of water. You can control the water and put it in a container to see if it can be put back. When he said it could be put back, he actually meant that he wasn't sure what substance was in the water. He also didn't know if the isolation bottle they brought would lose its effect. After all, there were no living creatures in the water. Maybe an ordinary container wouldn't be able to contain it. Lu Fang nodded. Lei Yao took out an isolation bottle from his equipment bag, unscrewed the cap, and put it on the ground. Then he stepped aside. Lu Fang raised his hand and hooked in the river. A fist-sized water droplet came out of the river and rose into the air. Then Lu Fang pointed at the bottle on the ground. The water droplet floated over and leaned against the bottle. Then it turned into a long rope of water and entered the bottle. After seeing the black water enter the transparent bottle, the others quietly waited for the bottle to change. They didn't rush up to take the bottle. See, a slight sound came from the bottle, and then everyone saw that cracks began to appear on the bottle. Pa, kacha, bang, hua. In less than 3 seconds, the entire bottle exploded. The glass bottle exploded into pieces. Everyone subconsciously took 2 steps back. Then, they looked at each other with a serious expression. The bottle exploded, and the water inside spilled all over the ground. Everyone instinctively avoided being near the water. Seems like the problem isn't small. Yuan Tianqing looked like he expected it. He sighed and turned to look at the river. Old Gua took out a dagger and threw in the air. He raised his hand and controlled it to put it into the river. After a while, his hand moved slightly and then loosened. His expression also darkened. He raised his hand and started to stroke his beard. Yuan Tianqing noticed his strangeness and turned to look at him. What's wrong? Old Gua's hand paused and then continued to stroke his beard. His eyes were still staring at the river below. He said, after I put the dagger down, my energy control was cut off, and I can't feel the dagger after I put it in the water. I don't know what's going on in the water. Yuan Tianqing squatted at the edge of the cliff and looked at the river. He was puzzled, but the water won't come up by itself. Why did the gorillas run out of the cave in fear? It shouldn't be, as long as they don't go near the river. What he said did make some sense, and everyone felt that it was very strange. Was it not the water that they were afraid of? Yuan Tianqing looked at the upper reaches of the underground river and decided to go there to see why the water became like this. He wanted to see if he could find anything. The group started to walk along the edge of the cliff and up the river. Fortunately, there were many passageways on both sides of the river, but there were also some places that required rock climbing. Rock climbing was not a problem for the zombies. It was not a big problem for the psychics either. Therefore, the group continued to move forward safely for a long time until they heard the rushing sound of water flowing down in front of them. After a while, they walked under an underground waterfall. They shone the flashlight up and found that the waterfall was not very high. It was about 6 or 7 meters high. The place where the water came out was a flat, oval black hole. The surrounding terrain was also very serious. There were cliffs all around. The only way forward was through the black hole. Chapter 1165. Fortunately, there was still some water on both sides of the hole, but it was still very dangerous to get too close. Be careful, don't fall into the water, Yuan Tianqing said as he jumped up and stood at the edge of the hole. Looking into the hole, there was an open space in front of them, and a huge underground lake appeared in front of them. Voila! Waves of ripples surged in the water. It was completely different from the calm underground river below. Yuan Tianqing did not need to look to know that there was a lot of danger coming from the lake, and he even felt that there were a lot of huge shadows surging in the water. The others quickly landed beside him and all held their breath when they saw the lake. They did not feel any danger when they were below, but as soon as they came up, they immediately felt a sense of danger coming towards them. Just as they appeared, there were many dark shadows swimming at the bottom of the lake, all diving in their direction. When Lu Fang came up, his expression suddenly changed. He shouted, "Not good! There is something coming from the water. Get out of the way!" At the same time, countless black tentacles suddenly burst out of the water not far in front of them, wriggling toward Yuan, Tianxing, and the others like snakes. Yuan, Tianxing, and the others reacted quickly and jumped back, once again falling down from where they came up. But these black tentacles were much faster than them, and Lei Yao, who reacted a little slower, was suddenly wrapped up. Lei Yao! Li Jing's expression changed when he saw this, and he shouted. He quickly threw out a few huge ice blades and shot them towards the tentacles that wrapped around Lei Yao. Bang, bang, bang. However, Li Jing's ice blades were shattered when they hit the tentacles. Just as Lei Yao was about to be dragged into the water, a metal spear flew out and pierced the tentacle with a puff sound. Old Mingguo raised his hands, a somewhat ferocious expression on his face as he controlled the spear to lift it up, while the tentacle twisted and wanted to pull it down. The force was so strong that it made it difficult for Old Mingguo to control it in midair. Lei Yao also wanted to use his arcana to break free from the ghost entangling him, but he found that he could not use his arcana. He could not feel the energy in his arcana core at all. If he couldn't feel the energy of his ability, then his whole body wouldn't be able to exert any strength. At this moment, a huge mouth filled with fangs burst out from the water and swallowed Lei Yao whole. Suddenly, a huge rock weighing a few hundred kilograms fell from the ceiling of the cave and flew into the huge mouth. Lei Yao was suddenly flung out of the room. However, the direction in which he was thrown wasn't towards the outside of the cave, but towards the center of the lake. A vine quickly shot towards Lei Yao, catching him before he could fall into the water. Then he suddenly pulled it back and threw it back into the air. Finally, after safely rescuing Lei Yao, everyone landed on the shore beside the waterfall, trembling in fear. "How are you? Are you hurt?" Li Zheng immediately ran to Lei Yao and asked worriedly. Lei Yao was still gasping for breath. He really thought that he was going to die here. Li Zheng's question jolted him back to his senses. He subconsciously looked down at his own body, then looked up and said to everyone, "I'm fine. You almost scared me to death. Be careful, brother." Feng Mingyu patted Lei Yao's shoulder. "Thank you." Lei Yao looked at him and thanked him. Feng Mingyu had thrown out the last vine to stop him from falling into the water. "All right, as long as you're fine." Yuan Tianxing looked at Lei Yao and saw that there was nothing wrong with his body. He nodded and turned to look at the cave entrance. Those tentacles looked like octopus tentacles, but they didn't have suction cups like octopus tentacles. Moreover, these tentacles were too long and thick. They were as thick as buckets and smooth. The huge mouth that had just appeared looked like the mouth of a fish. The 2 rows of sharp teeth in the mouth were horrifying. "What are those? Mutated fish? What are those tentacles?" Feng Mingyu asked in confusion. Everyone looked at each other, then turned to look at the cave entrance. From the shape of the mouth, it looks like a fish, but I don't know what those tentacles are. Could they be something that grew on that monster's body? Or another kind of monster? I don't know, but that thing is so big, and it feels like there's more than one in the water. Yuan Tianxing shook his head and looked at Lu Feng. "What do you feel?" Lu Feng turned back and nodded at him, then let out a long roar. "Roar." Old Mingguo explained for him. He said there's more than one. There are many of these things in the water, and those tentacles are also from this kind of fish. You may not be able to see them, but I can feel their shape in the water. Their bodies are actually round. Its whole body is covered with those tentacles, not like a fish that has a fish tail and a long strip. Everyone imagined a ball with a fish's head and a fish's mouth, and its body was full of tentacles that wriggled like tentacles. Why does it feel like a giant pufferfish? But pufferfish don't have tentacles, and they have tails. Lin Yu imagined an angry pufferfish with tentacles all over its body. It was an indescribable scene. Lu Feng glanced at him, thought for a moment, and then nodded. It did look a bit like a pufferfish, but this was a giant and a long-haired pufferfish. It's so aggressive. It seems that the hole is too small for them to come in. Yuan Tianxing looked at the hole and thought about the big mouth he saw just now. The fish's mouth was at least 10 meters wide, and it was about 3 to 4 meters high. The hole above the waterfall was oval, and it was only 2 to 3 meters high. The 2 sides were wide and long, but it was a bit narrow for these things. If the one just now wasn't the biggest, then the smallest one probably wasn't that much smaller. Is it because of the smell of these things that scared the gorillas away? Could it be that these things will run ashore? Li Zheng turned his head and looked back. They had walked a few kilometers from the gorilla's cave. Although it wasn't very close, it wasn't far either. Swoosh! Suddenly, many long and thick tentacles rushed out of the hole and instantly flew toward Yuan, Tianxing, and the others. Everyone dodged back, but the place on the shore was too small, and everyone's movements were very consistent. As a result, the place behind them was a bit crowded. Fortunately, a few high-level people jumped directly to the other side of the pool onto the waterfall. Bang, bang, bang. After everyone dodged, those tentacles directly poked the place where they were just now, and all the rocks were blown away. After not catching their prey, these tentacles bounced up and continued to rush toward them. Their target was not only Yuan, Tianxing, and the others, but also Old Mingua and the other zombies. A row of huge saw-teeth flashed in the hole above. Chapter 11:66. Why is there such a big lake underground, and there are such creatures in the lake? Has the entire Earth mutated? Not to mention the mutation on land, there are so many mutated things underground. Sigh, is the Earth going to be destroyed? Are we really going to build a huge spaceship like in the sci-fi movies and take humans to the sky? Oldwood shook his head and said. Everyone looked at him speechlessly. It can't be that serious. It's not to the point where humans can't survive. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Although Yuan, Tianxing, and the others quickly moved far away, distancing themselves from the tentacle-like tentacles, those things didn't stop there. However, those things didn't stop there. They continued to squeeze their tentacles out of the holes in the waterfall and wave them around. Unwilling to give up, they reached out in their direction. Since they had distanced themselves, they didn't waste their energy to attack these tentacles. But with these things blocking their way, they couldn't continue to investigate further. The lake above was too big. When Yuan Tianxing went up to look inside, he couldn't even see the edge. He could only see the water and the top of the cave, separated by a rock wall that was dozens of meters high. The top was all black rocks. And it wasn't just the water here that had a problem. Even the surrounding rock walls were problematic. Just now, when Yuan Tianxing controlled the rock wall at the top of the cave, he found that the effect of his energy had been reduced by more than half. His control over these rocks had been greatly reduced by 70%, so he could only dig out a huge rock from above. He originally planned to control the rocks above to extend downwards and directly crush the monster, but reality told him that he couldn't do it. Let's retreat first. We can't go any further. If I'm not wrong, this water is polluted by these things. Maybe they suddenly appeared here recently, but I don't know how they appeared. Let's see if there's another way to go up. Yuan Tianxing retreated to the edge of a protruding rock wall and said to everyone. The 100-meter-long tentacles of the water monsters swayed in the air for a while, but they couldn't reach Yuan Tianxing and the others, so they gradually retreated. However, just as Yuan Tianxing and the others were going back the way they came, suddenly there was a loud bang at the hole in the waterfall, and then the surrounding began to shake. Many stones rolled down from the surrounding stone walls. Some even cracked and fell down. Not good. Retreat. Yuan Tianxing was startled by the sound. He looked up, and his expression changed. He immediately shouted. Hua! Bang! Another loud noise came from the cave entrance. Yuan Tianxing and the others felt their feet becoming unsteady. At the same time, the hole that was originally only 2 to 3 meters high was smashed open by the heads of the huge fish monsters, causing rocks to fly everywhere. Like a dam that had been broken by a flood, the water surged down violently. The black waves came crashing down like some terrible monster. The zombies' reactions were very fast. Everyone's instinctive sense of danger made them all flash their claws and jump up the cliff. Feng Mingyu and a few other humans who were slower to react were all dragged down. Li Zheng and the others didn't have the instincts of zombies. By the time they reacted, a large amount of water had already poured down, splashing everywhere. The water was dangerous. They could not touch it. Although they understood, their bodies' reactions were a bit slower. Yuan Tianxing's level was high, so he was able to react in time. However, when he saw his subordinate Fei Chonglin was about to be splashed with the black water, he suddenly stomped on the rock wall and dashed toward Fei Chonglin. He then kicked him away. At the same time, the skin on his body turned to stone. The moment he kicked Fei Chonglin away, he used Fei Chonglin's body to propel himself to the other side. The black water that was about to splash on Fei Chonglin's body directly splashed onto Yuan Tianqing. Fei Chonglin was kicked away and hit the cliff next to him. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and used his hands to grab the protruding rocks on the cliff. He didn't fall directly into the river. After feeling that he was safe, he immediately remembered that Yuan Tianqing had blocked the black water for him. He subconsciously called out worriedly, "Deputy leader, are you okay?" Yuan Tianqing landed on the other side of the stone wall. He spent a lot of energy to open up a very shallow hole in the stone wall, and then he fell into the hole. He turned around and waved at Fei Chonglin, then said loudly, "I'm fine. Let's get out of here." Fei Chonglin, Lei Yao, Feng Mingyu, and Lin Yu were the weakest in the team. Their abilities were not above rank 3. Lin Yu was only rank 2. He hadn't even broken through to rank 3. The reason why Yuan Tianqing brought them down was because they were his subordinates he was most familiar with, and also because they were members of the intelligence department when they were in Hades King's base, so their observation skills were better. Now that they had encountered such an irresistible situation, although their reactions and thoughts were able to keep up, their physical strength could not. That was why Lei Yao and Fei Chonglin were in such a dangerous situation. Of course, Yuan Tianqing couldn't just stand by and watch when he could save them. Although he told them that he was fine, he was the only one who knew the actual situation. His entire body skin and even his muscles had turned into stone using his special ability. His entire person had actually become a walking stone statue. He was invulnerable to weapons and could not be physically harmed. However, after being splashed by the black water, he still felt as if his skin was being burned by fire. From his neck to his shoulders and half of his chest, it was as if he'd been burned by an ultra-high temperature fire. It was as if his flesh and blood were about to melt. However, he endured the pain and didn't show it on his face. After landing in the hole in the stone wall, he immediately jumped back out. At this time, everyone had already retreated as fast as they could. This section of the underground river wasn't very deep, but the black water from the lake had expanded and the water level had risen a lot. Fortunately, everyone found a place to rest before the water reached the top, so they didn't hesitate to escape. Bang, bang, bang. Sounds of impact could still be heard from the hole where the waterfall was. Every time it hit, the ground shook. The creatures in the lake didn't give up and continued to slam into the hole, smashing many of the stone walls at the edge of the hole. Before, when there was no food, they could still quietly stay here, killing each other and eating each other's meat to survive. Now that there was prey that tasted even more delicious than their own, they immediately became restless. That was why they rushed into the hole, wanting to rush out and hunt for food. Chapter 1167. Yuan Tianqing didn't expect that he could still be hurt by the water of the underground river, even though he was petrified with his supernatural ability. "I think it's better to seal this place. We can't let those things run out along the underground river." Old Man Guo frowned and said after they arrived at a safe place. Yuan Tianqing said, "You guys go out first. I'll try." He looked at the upstream of the river. After the dam burst, the water level of the underground river had risen a lot. He was an earth elemental and the strongest one here. He was the only one who could block the river. "You want to go alone? It's too dangerous." When Li Zheng heard what he said, he immediately disagreed. "You guys can't help even if you go. It's better to go up first, in case something unexpected happens here," Yuan Tianqing said to them expressionlessly. Although Li Zheng didn't agree with his approach, Yuan Tianqing's words were not unreasonable. Even if they followed, they would only be a burden. He looked at Old Man Guo and wanted him to say something. In the end, Old Man Guo patted Yuan Tianqing's shoulder without hesitation and said, "All right, go ahead. We'll wait for you at the entrance of the underground gorillas." The old man turned around and continued to walk forward. Li Zheng heard him say this, and was a little surprised and wanted to say something. At this moment, Yuan Tianxing also patted his shoulder and said, "All right, listen to my orders." Li Zheng had no choice but to respond, "Yes." Then he led the others and left with old man Gua. On the other side, Lin Wenwen, who had returned to 7 years ago, used Dong Xinxin's identity to buy a bunch of things. When the delivery man brought the things to the front door of the Dong family's mansion, the Dong family's butler and bodyguards were dumbfounded. Fortunately, Lin Wenwen had informed the guard in advance. If someone delivered to the door, they could just let them in. Otherwise, the delivery man wouldn't be able to come in. Looking at the bags of rice and noodles, as well as all kinds of packaged food, supplies, and medicine in the warehouse, the old butler was dumbfounded. The old housekeeper was really confused. He couldn't help but pull Dong Lijia and ask quietly, "What does second miss want to do? Why did you buy so much rice?" Their second miss had been really strange these days. Her taste in food had changed. She was either working out in the gym or running in the backyard. How was she still the lazy, fat second miss from before? After Lin Wenwen asked his men to move all the goods into the warehouse, he chased everyone out. Then he closed the door and went inside to collect his things, storing them all in the space. Anyway, she had a lot of space now. It was not a problem for her to store dozens of tons of rice. Looking at Dong Lijia's increasingly distressed expression, Lin Wenwen felt very relaxed. In order to exchange bodies with the real Dong Xinxin, she worked hard to help her lose weight while continuing to conquer her brother. But looking at the clean food before the apocalypse, Lin Wenwen was willing to help her. Anyway, her space was static. Since she could bring back things from 7 years later, she should be able to put things in her space and bring them back. Lin Wenwen was not worried about this problem. What she was more worried about was whether Dong Xinxin could really send her back. After a few days of communication, she finally figured out what Dong Xinxin's special ability was. Space-time shift, a very, very powerful special ability. For someone like her, the space element was too weak. Anyway, after the apocalypse, although there were not many space abilities, at least there were many in every base. However, compared to Dong Xinxin's ability, it seemed very ordinary. According to what Dong Xinxin said before, she could actually make herself go back to a point in time that she had experienced before. It was more like controlling time, but not the kind that could control time. The difference was that when she went back, there would really be two Dong Xinxin. Then, as long as she and the previous Dong Xinxin looked at each other face to face, they could merge into one. It could also be said that she returned to that point in time, but it was not the way to go back in time. Moreover, the time she went back also changed according to the level of her ability. In the beginning, she could only go back half an hour. She couldn't go back more than half an hour. Until the second level, she could go back 12 hours. Then the third level, she could go back 3 days. At the fourth level, she could go back 1 month. She had never told anyone about this special ability, only she knew about it. When she went out with the zombie hunting team to kill zombies, she also used guns and knives. This kind of special and powerful ability, she definitely did not dare to tell others. Dong Xinxin, who had survived for 7 years after the apocalypse, was no longer the Dong Xinxin who foolishly believed everyone before the apocalypse. This time, when she died, her energy core used up the last trace of energy to activate her ability. She did not expect to return to 7 years ago. Those two women are really attentive. They would ask you out to play every other day. What happened to you guys? Lin Wenwen chatted with Dong Xinxin while collecting supplies in the warehouse. These days, Qin Jiao and Lin Yue called her every day to ask her out to play. They said that Dong Xinxin had too few friends before, so she didn't have much time to play. They also said that this summer vacation was her last indulgence. When school started, she would enter the 3rd year of high school and have to sprint for the college entrance examination. At that time, she would have no time to play and so on. On one hand, they say it was for her own good, but on the other hand, they secretly wanted her to go to a crowded place and embarrass herself. This was Lin Wenwen's thoughts after interacting with these two for the past few days. During the apocalypse, Qin Jiao became a zombie, but Lin Yuehui didn't. She awakened her water ability. When they escaped to the survival camp, she gradually became the core of the team. Dong Xin said in her mind, "Didn't you guys go together at that time?" Lin Wenwen asked curiously. "No, when the apocalypse came, who would care about others? At that time, we weren't with her," Dong Xin said lightly. Lin Wenwen listened and nodded. When it was time for dinner, Lin Wenwen looked at the long table full of delicious dishes and happily ate. Other than her and Dong Lijia, there was also a middle-aged man and a well-maintained middle-aged woman. She heard from Dong Xin that when the apocalypse came, their family was very lucky not to become zombies, but they also did not awaken their abilities. But later on the way to the survival camp, her father, in order to protect the last packet of instant noodles for her, got into a conflict and was shot to death by the other party. At that time, they didn't have their abilities, so in the eyes of the other party, they were nothing. And a few days after that, her mother was secretly pushed into the zombies when she was trying to break out of the zombie horde. She was scratched by the zombies, and then her mother committed suicide. After seeing the ugliness of human nature after the apocalypse, Dong Xin, who was now talking to Lin Wenwen, always had a kind of indifference in his tone. Chapter 1168. Xin, slow down. Eating too fast isn't good for your stomach. The middle-aged woman looked at her daughter's unusual eating habits and couldn't help but advise her. "Oh." Lin Wenwen was gnawing on a piece of pork rib when he heard the middle-aged woman's words. He had no choice but to change the way he ate. "Xin, I heard that you haven't gone out these few days and have been working out of home. Have you made up your mind this time?" Mr. Dong was a fat man with a big belly. He exuded a refined temperament that people who worked hard in the business world would have. He looked at Lin Wenwen and asked pleasantly. Lin Wenwen nodded. "Yes, that's right. Uncle, that. Dad, if you have time, you should also pay attention to exercise more." Looking at Dong Xin's father, Lin Wenwen almost called the wrong person. "Why do you suddenly want to work out? Did someone attack you?" Mr. Dong didn't take Lin Wenwen's words to heart, but was concerned about his daughter's abnormality. "No." Lin Wenwen shook his head. After thinking for a while, he said, "It's to prepare for 3 months later." 3 months later? 3rd year in high school. You don't have to work so hard. Mrs. Dong thought that Lin Wenwen was talking about the time when school started. Lin Wenwen glanced at Dong Lijia, who was eating quietly with his head lowered, and then shook his head. "No, there would be no high school for her in 3 months." "No? Then why? Is there anything else?" Mrs. Dong looked at her with doubt. That's right. Well, you can ask Dong Lijia to tell you when it's convenient." "All right, I'm full." Lin Wenwen knew that Dong Lijia had not told them about the end of the world, so he decided to push him. After saying that, he put down the empty bowl, got up, and slipped away. "Hey, Xin, you just ate a bowl of rice. Why are you so full?" Mrs. Dong didn't expect her to slip away so quickly. She subconsciously looked at her back and said. Dong Lijia, who was engrossed in eating, was suddenly reminded by Lin Wenwen. He wasn't ready to confess to his father yet. He was a little flustered. "What did Xin ask you to tell us?" Mr. Dong looked at Dong Lijia and asked. Oh, that? I don't know how to tell you right now. Let me think about it first. I'll tell you when I'm done." In the past few days, Dong Lijia had begun to sell the small companies in his hands. He had also begun to sell the stocks he bought in the university. However, he had yet to figure out how to convince his father. After all, no one would believe such a thing. "Why are you being so mysterious?" Mrs. Dong glanced at him in confusion and continued to eat. "Then, you can tell me when you have thought about it." Mr. Dong's character was still relatively good to his child, and he was not strict with him. Seeing that Dong Lijia had not thought it through, he said so. On the other hand, Lin Wenwen had just finished his meal and was taking a stroll in the courtyard to aid digestion when his phone rang. Lin Wenwen rolled his eyes when he saw Qin Jiao's name. Then, he hung up and continued to stroll. Unexpectedly, after she hung up, the phone rang again. It was still Qin Jiao. Lin Wenwen answered impatiently. "Hello, what's the matter?" Qin Jiao heard the impatience in her tone. She looked at Lin Yuehui, who was beside her. Then, she said with a smile, Xin, are you going to hang out with your brother today? I heard that he and Xinfei are going to the Luo family to celebrate second young Master Luo's birthday. Will you come too? Second young Master Luo? Who was that? Lin Wenwen asked Dong Xinshin in her mind in confusion, but she said perfunctorily, "What does it have to do with me? I don't want to go." Dong Xinshin said to her in her mind, "Second young Master Luo is my brother's best friend, but he is very annoying. If you have a chance, help me beat him up." When talking about second young Master Luo, Dong Xinshin's tone had a rare, more angry emotion, but it did not seem that he was really angry. Lin Wenwen rolled her eyes and smiled. Oh, it seemed that these two guys had a story. However, from her observations over the past few days, Deng Chenfei, who often came to her house, seemed to be a little strange. On the surface, he said that he was looking for Dong Lijia, but in fact, he often glanced at her. Lin Wenwen pretended not to see it, but it did not mean that she did not know. She just noticed that when Dong Xinshin talked about Deng Chenfei, his tone was usually cold and calm. It seemed that there was no hope for Deng Chenfei. Oh, why? Isn't second young Master Luo your brother's best friend? He invited you too, right? Wouldn't it be disrespectful if you don't go? After hearing Lin Wenwen's answer, Qin Jiao did not give up and asked her. Originally, she wanted to lie down on her birthday and let Dong Xinshin make a joke out of her. It could be funny, and it could also discuss those rich heirs. When that time came, everyone would definitely look at her as a joke. Then, they could pretend to help her. On one hand, they could get a good impression from her, and on the other hand, they could get a good impression from Dong Lijia. However, if she refused to come, then wouldn't their plan be ruined? Thinking of this, Qin Jiao was a little anxious, and she kept blinking at Lin Yuehui. Lin Yuehui found a notebook in her room and wrote 3 words on it. Wu Mingho. Seeing the name Wu Mingho, Qin Jiao's eyes immediately lit up, and she said, "But if you don't come, then you won't be able to see Wu Mingho, right? Didn't you say that you like him?" Lin Wenwen heard another unfamiliar name, and she was a little speechless. She said that was in the past. However, in her heart, she said to Dong Xinshin, "You like this Wu Mingho? They found so many bait to lure you. It seems like they won't stop until they see you tonight." Then Dong Xinshin said to her coldly, "Like you said, that was in the past. Who cares who he is now?" Lin Wenwen nodded in her heart, but before Qin Jiao could speak, she said, "All right, let me think about whether to go tonight or not. Maybe I'll go if I'm in a good mood. Don't call me again to talk about this, okay? That's all for now." With that, she hung up the phone and turned it off. Qin Jiao, who was on the opposite side, looked at Lin Yuehui with a confused face and said, "She actually said that she'll come if she's in a good mood? Does she not like Wu Mingho anymore?" Lin Yuehui listened to her words and showed a puzzled expression, and then said with some disbelief, "It doesn't seem like it." She blushed when she saw Wu Mingho. Her face was clearly red, but she couldn't help but pique. How could she suddenly not like him? Or did Wu Mingho do something to her? Qin Jiao looked at her. "Then what should we do now? If she really doesn't come tonight, then wouldn't our previous arrangements be in vain?" Lin Yuehui thought about it and shook her head. "I think she will definitely come. Let's wait and see." Chapter 1169. Qin Jiao glanced at the phone in her hand and threw it on the table. She said with a puzzled expression, "Why has Dong Xinshin's attitude been so strange these days? Did she find out something?" Dong Xinshin had been very cold to them these days. They had known each other for a year, and it wasn't easy to build a good relationship with her. She had finally reached the stage where she would listen to everything they said. Why was there such a huge gap between them in the past few days? Did she hear something from others? Their social circle wasn't big, but it wasn't small either. Which of the rich young masters and daughters in the city didn't know that Dong Lijia had a very fat sister? Of course, there were many people who had seen her. It was just that Dong Xinshin was more introverted and silly. People wanted to be friends with her not because of her endless pocket money, but because of her identity. Otherwise, who would want to stay with such a fat pig all day long? None of them wanted to be friends with her, and those who treated her as a friend were pushed away by those who approached her with ulterior motives. In order to get close to Dong Lijia, Qin Jiao carefully investigated Dong Xinshin's situation and tried to build a good relationship with her. It's possible. Lin Yuehui also felt that Dong Xinshin's attitude towards them had changed these days. After thinking about it, she felt that Qin Jiao's words were very likely to be true. Why don't we find someone to check if she has been in contact with anyone recently? Her change in attitude must be caused by someone. I want to see who is secretly trying to ruin our relationship. Qin Jiao thought about it, and her delicate face became a little gloomy. A cold light flashed through her meticulously applied eye makeup. She bent down to pick up the phone again, found a number, and dialed it. Hello. Help me check if Dong Xinxin has been in contact with any strange people in the past few days. If he didn't find anything in the past few days, he would continue to check the time before that. In a week, or a month or two. I want to know the reason for her change in attitude recently. After finishing the call, she put down the phone and looked at Lin Yuehui. Lin Yuehui still had a thoughtful expression on her face. She was thinking about the last time they went shopping with Dong Xinxin. Did anything happen? She remembered that Dong Xinxin had been a little strange that day. After Lin Wenwen hung up the phone, she took a walk for an hour before returning to her room. She saw Dong Lijia sitting in her room with a frown and a bitter look on his face. What? Look at your expression. You haven't said anything yet. I've already found a chance for you to say it. Why are you still hesitating? We don't have much time left. Lin Wenwen knew what he was thinking when he saw his expression. Dong Lijia said, I'm afraid they won't believe me. Why don't you come with me? If you are with me, it will be more believable. Lin Wenwen thought about it and said, That's fine, but you have to promise me something. Lin Wenwen thought and said, What? Lin Wenwen said, I will persuade them as your sister. You have to help me hide my identity. Dong Lijia stared at her for 3 seconds before he reacted. Are you trying to say that you pretended to be my sister and experienced the apocalypse, and then suddenly came back? Lin Wenwen nodded and said, Otherwise, even if you say I'm another person, they definitely won't believe it. I could tell them that I suddenly had 7 more years of memories, and then I experienced death, and then I was reborn. Moreover, the Dong Xinxin in 7 years will be different from the Dong Xinxin now. I can copy her and make some changes to make your parents believe me. After all, he had to choose between believing in a stranger who had taken over his daughter's body or believing that his daughter would return 7 years later. I think the latter is more believable. Dong Lijia thought for a moment and nodded. Then he asked her, You know my sister's life and experience 7 years later? Lin Wenwen said, Of course I know. Didn't I say that she's still in this body? In the past few days, he had only woken up occasionally. Most of the time, he had been asleep. But when she woke up, she told me a lot of things. Dong Lijia looked at her knowingly and agreed with her idea. Then he stood up and said to her, In that case, I'll do as you say. Let's go find my dad now. Then he walked to the door, opened it, and stood there looking back at her. Lin Wenwen shrugged and followed him out. They found Mr. Dong's study after many turns. Lin Wenwen complained, I really don't understand you rich people. Don't you feel very insecure living in such a big house? Dong Lijia said carelessly, No, maybe I'm used to it. Besides, there are bodyguards and servants at home. But I haven't asked you, what did you do before? How old are you? Are you a man or a woman? Damn, are you a man? At the end of his words, Dong Lijia suddenly turned around and stared at Lin Wenwen in horror. He thought that this was a man who occupied his sister's body and then saw her naked body. Dong Lijia suddenly had the urge to go crazy. Tell me, you're a woman, right? Am I right? Dong Lijia suddenly pulled Lin Wenwen to the corner of the corridor and pressed her against the wall. He stared at her in horror and asked anxiously, Lin Wenwen, wasn't her reaction a little too slow? How many days had passed before he thought of asking her this question? Looking at Dong Lijia's expression that was about to break down, she said quietly, If I say I'm a man, what will you do? Dong Lijia's expression instantly stiffened. The two of them looked at each other in silence. After a long time, Dong Lijia's face suddenly darkened. He stared at her and said, Marry her. Lin Wenwen. She pushed Dong Lijia away expressionlessly, and Lin Wenwen immediately covered her mouth and laughed like crazy. Ha ha! Don't worry, I'm just teasing you, she said as she walked forward. Dong Lijia was stunned, and his face darkened. You lied to me before? No, I don't believe what you said after. Tell me, who are you? Don't go if you don't tell me. Dong Lijia pulled her back angrily and continued to press her against the wall. If the other party was really a man, after hearing that she wanted him to be responsible for Xin and marry her, he immediately changed his mind and lied to her again? No way. This man had seen and touched his sister's body. If he just left like that, then wouldn't his Xin be at a loss? At the thought of this, Dong Lijia felt terrible. As a sister complex, he was now in full force. He looked at Lin Wenwen as if she was a scumbag who had taken advantage of his sister. When Lin Wenwen saw his persistent gaze, she suddenly felt like she had shot herself in the foot. Chapter 1170. You should clean up your own joke. No. I'm really a woman. I'm not lying to you. Lin Wenwen quickly said to Dong Lijia. Looking at Dong Lijia, who was about to go berserk, Lin Wenwen was a little scared. What if this guy always treated her as a man and pestered her every day to be responsible for Dong Xin in the future? Although when she returned to 7 years later, the things here should no longer have anything to do with her. But if he pestered her every day for the next few months, she would be annoyed to death by him. Dong Lijia gritted his teeth and stared at her. How are you going to prove it? Prove what? Lin Wenwen was about to answer him when Mr. Dong's voice suddenly came from the side. The two turned their heads at the same time and saw Mr. Dong standing not far away with a big belly, looking at them blankly. Dong Lijia looked back and suddenly realized that the current posture of the two was a little strange in his father's eyes. He instantly let go of his hand and took a step back. Oh, no, nothing. Dad, we have something to talk to you about. Of course, he couldn't tell his father that there was another person living in Dong Xin's body. Now, even if the other party didn't ask him for help, he had to help him hide it. If his father knew that there was an unknown man living in Xin's body, he might go berserk like him. It's about the thing we talked about today. Come on. Mr. Dong looked at the two of them back and forth in confusion, then turned around and walked to his study. Lin Wenwen quickly slipped out to distance herself from Dong Lijia. Behind her, Dong Lijia made a "I'll look for you when the business is done" gesture. After entering Mr. Dong's study, Mr. Dong sat on the sofa. He pointed to the sofa next to him and asked him to sit down. The study of a rich man was very big. The room of more than 100 square meters was filled with bookcases on one side, and there was a luxurious rectangular desk in front of the bookcase. On the other side, there was a luxurious sofa and coffee table. The room was also decorated with many famous paintings and expensive handicrafts. Tell me, what are you hiding from us? Xin suddenly went to the gym to lose weight, and Jia has been mysterious these days. After seeing the two sitting down, Mr. Dong asked them curiously. The two of them looked at each other. Dong Lijia looked at Lin Wenwen with some anger in his eyes. Pointing at Lin Wenwen, he turned to his father and said, "She said that in 2 months and 25 days, it will be the end of the world. Dad, ask her." Lin Wenwen, who was suddenly used as a gun, was speechless. This wasn't the opening they had agreed on. Why did he suddenly throw the blame to her? Was it because of what happened just now? What? Jia, can you repeat what you just said? Mr. Dong looked at Dong Lijia in disbelief and confusion, as if he had heard something incredible. He did not understand why Dong Lijia would suddenly say such a thing. Dong Lijia pointed in Lin Wenwen's direction and said, "He said it. Dad, ask him, ask him." With that, he crossed his arms in front of his chest and turned his face to the side. Looking at Dong Lijia's willful look, Lin Wenwen could only quietly turn his head to look at Mr. Dong. He's right, it's true. On the night of September 1st, the whole world will be changed. On the morning of September 2nd, the whole world will fall into panic and chaos. 90% of the people in the city will become mindless living dead, she said to Mr. Dong very seriously. But Mr. Dong's eyes told her that he was now like a psycho. Jia, your sister hasn't been entangled by any strange organization recently, right? After listening to Lin Wenwen, Mr. Dong turned to look at Dong Lijia and asked. Dong Lijia snorted and said no. Mr. Dong pointed at Dong Xin in confusion. Then do you really believe what she said now? Dong Lijia thought for a moment and suddenly stood up. He lowered his head and hooked his finger at Lin Wenwen. Then he said, "Come, come, let's fight." As he spoke, he walked to the empty space in the middle of the study. When Mr. Dong heard this, he immediately slammed the table and glared at him angrily. "Nonsense! Are you going to hit your sister?" Dong Lijiao was intimidated by his imposing manner and shrank his neck, but he said firmly, "We still don't know who's going to hit who. Why don't you come over?" After saying that, he glared at Lin Wenwen again. Lin Wenwen was speechless. He really wanted to fight with her, and he wanted to fight her as if she were a man. However, in order to make Mr. Dong believe this, she could only make a move. "Okay then, Dad. Dad, just watch and you'll know if what I said just now is true or not." As she spoke, she also stood up. Although it was weird to call another uncle Dad for her identity, she still had to call him that. Mr. Dong looked at her with a confused face. He thought to himself, is she really going to fight with her brother? Then he turned his head to look at Dong Lijia, but he saw that Dong Lijia's eyes didn't have any intention of backing down. Instead, he was a little angry. Why was he angry? As soon as Lin Wenwen stood up, Dong Lijia unceremoniously waved his fist and rushed over. Her imposing manner scared Papa Dong, and his face changed. He subconsciously said to stop him, "Wait a minute." However, before he finished shouting, he saw his fat daughter use a very agile posture to lean to the side, nimbly raised her hand and caught Dong Lijia's fist. Then she turned her body and kicked. Bang, ouch! Mr. Dong watched helplessly as Dong Lijia was thrown to the ground by Lin Wenwen with ease. Again, Dong Lijia got up and rushed towards Lin Wenwen again, continuing to punch her in the face. At this time, he was relieved that Lin Wenwen would definitely be able to dodge it. At the same time, he thought that even if he could hit Dong Xinshin's face, it wasn't his sister who would be hurt. Anyway, it was just a fist, and it wouldn't have the effect of disfigurement. Lin Wenwen also just calmly tilted her head, and then quickly reached out and hit the elbow of his outstretched hand with her knuckles, and then poked hard in his armpit. Then Dong Lijia's face twisted in pain as if his toes had been hit. He bent over and jumped to the side, screaming. Lin Wenwen clapped her hands, then turned back to look at Mr. Dong and said, "How about it? If you really know your biological daughter, then you should know that she wouldn't do this." Mr. Dong closed his stiff jaw and then began to look at Lin Wenwen with surprise and uncertainty. He was a man in his 20s. To be able to build such a large listed company from scratch, of course, he had seen a lot of scenes. And although his son's attack just now was a little fake, his daughter's very skillful dodging and counterattack was something he couldn't understand. Because his daughter had never learned fighting or martial arts. You, who are you? Chapter 1171. I'm your daughter, but my mental age is 24 years old, not 17 years old like I am now. So of course it's different, Lin Wenwen said calmly when he heard him ask who he was. She looked around and said, if it weren't for this body being too fat and weak, I would be able to throw him 10 meters away. I would be able to throw him 10 meters away. As he spoke, Lin Wenwen pointed at Dong Lijia, who was still grimacing in pain. Dong Lijia's arm, which had been hit by Lin Wenwen, was hanging limply. Dong Lijia was hit on the nerve-numbing acupuncture point, and it was as if he was struck by electricity. His whole arm was in pain and numb, and he didn't want to try it again. So she's been working hard to lose weight these days. In fact, she's not just working out, she's training. In order to improve her stamina and strength as soon as possible, Dong Lijia explained. Mr. Dong looked at Dong Lijia and then looked at Lin Wenwen. He knew very well that even if Dong Lijia stood there and stretched out his hand to her, Dong Xinshin wouldn't be able to throw him over, let alone throw him over her shoulder so cleanly, quickly, and accurately like she did just now. He was very surprised, and he began to feel conflicted, because what his daughter said just now was like nonsense. What doomsday? What people all over the world would become mindless living dead? It wasn't like a scene in a zombie movie. How could it happen in the real world? But his daughter's current action was really beyond the scope of his understanding. You, first tell me how you know this kind of fighting skill? And what's with the mental age of 24 you just said? Mr. Dong looked at her with a headache and asked, "Oh, after the apocalypse, if you're not agile enough and your reaction isn't fast enough, you'll be eaten by zombies. Mental age is what I came back from 7 years in the future. Dad, I'm no longer the 17-year-old me now," Lin Wenwen said to him with a serious expression. She paused and then continued, "I know what will happen from now to 7 years in the future. I've lived in the apocalypse for 7 years, and not only did I learn some self-defense and fighting skills, I also learned to see through people's hearts. So believe me, what I said just now is not false." Mr. Dong's head was hurting, and he still couldn't understand why his daughter suddenly became like this. He still didn't believe what she said, but his daughter said it as if it was true. I still can't believe it. Xin, what you're saying is too illogical." He looked at Lin Wenwen and said, "Then how do you explain everything that has changed in me? This isn't scientific either. How about this? I'll prove it to you again. Can you give me a real gun?" Lin Wenwen looked at him and thought for a while, then suddenly asked him for a gun. She knew that it was very easy for someone at Mr. Dong's level to get a real gun. With his abilities, it wouldn't be a problem for him to do a few dozen of them in secret. Although she really wanted to take one out of her space, it would mean that she would expose the existence of her space. Although Dong Lijiao already knew, Dong Lijiao would definitely not let her do this in order to hide her true identity. If she used the space now, wouldn't it be strange if Dong Xin didn't have the space after she left? What? Why do you still want that thing? Don't touch such a dangerous thing. As soon as he heard that she wanted a gun, Mr. Dong's attitude immediately changed. A real gun. This wasn't a joke. If it went off by accident, people would die. If you don't give it to me, how can I prove to you that I experienced those 7 years? Don't worry, you can remove all the bullets. Lin Wenwen said, No, how can a child play with this? Mr. Dong still shook his head at her with a straight face. Lin Wenwen could only look at Dong Lijia. He was supposed to be the one to convince the adults, but now it was her doing it. It was only right for her to seek some help from him. Dong Lijia was still brooding over her true identity as a short, ugly, and wretched man, but he had to respond to her eye signal. "Dad, give it to her. Since you think she's talking nonsense, then you should give her a chance to prove it. Besides, she also said that the gun is empty, so nothing will happen. Just see what she wants to do with the gun." Dong Lijia persuaded his father. Mr. Dong looked at him angrily. "Do you believe what she said? How can you believe such unrealistic words?" Dong Lijia saw that his father wasn't willing to give something dangerous like a gun to Lin Wenwen, so he immediately got up and walked to the bookshelf in the study. He looked at one of the shelves, then pushed open the book on it, and reached in his search for it. Mr. Dong was a little excited when he saw his actions. He stood up and said, "Stop. How do you know where it is?" After Dong Lijia finished searching, he quickly withdrew his hand. Then he saw that there was a secret compartment in the bookshelf. There was a Type 64 pistol in the secret compartment. This was a real pistol. "Oh, I know all your secrets. I also know where you hide your pocket money. Do you want me to tell my mom?" Dong Lijia said to Mr. Dong while taking out the gun. "Don't you dare." When Mr. Dong heard that he knew where he hid his pocket money, he immediately scolded him fiercely. But his voice was a little weak, and he subconsciously looked at the door. Dong Lijia didn't care about him. He took the gun and removed all the bullets, then put the empty gun in front of Lin Wenwen. Lin Wenwen had previously asked Dong Xin how long it would take for her to disassemble an ordinary pistol. Everyone was familiar with disassembling and reassembling guns in the apocalypse, and Dong Xin often went out to hunt zombies. Dong Xin told her that the fastest time from disassembling to reassembling a gun was 15 seconds. In the eyes of ordinary people, it was considered fast. Lin Wenwen's own speed was about the same. If she didn't train in the base for a year, she wouldn't be able to do it. Seeing that Dong Lijia brought the gun over, she took the gun and took out the magazine for the two to see. There were no bullets, so there was no danger of fire. Then, after putting the magazine in, she began to skillfully disassemble the gun. After disassembling it, she quickly reassembled it. Her movements were like flowing water, so fast that the other two men couldn't see her movements clearly. "Kacha! Kacha! Kacha, kacha. After the sound of mechanical assembly, the gun that she disassembled was reassembled. In fact, her movements weren't very fast, but they weren't slow either. If she wasn't familiar with guns, she wouldn't be able to do this. Okay, you guys can check it. Then, Dad, think about whether I could do this in the past, and then think about whether you should believe what I said before. After Lin Wenwen said this, he stood up. I'll go back to my room first. After saying this, she left. Anyway, Mr. Dong was the same as Dong Lijia. He just needed time to digest. The two men of the Dong family silently looked at the gun that she reassembled. Chapter 1172. Back in the room, Lin Wenwen was about to change her clothes and go to the gym to work out. After a few days of adjustment and exercise, her whole body was still sore. But she still needed to persevere. She had tried it before, but it wasn't as difficult as it was now. This body was too fat. She changed her clothes and was about to go to the gym to work out for another 2 hours. As soon as she opened the door, she saw Dong Lijia walking towards her while talking on the phone. Well, don't worry. I'll be there soon. I won't be late. Okay, that's all for now. Seeing Lin Wenwen appear, he immediately hung up the phone. Then he stopped in front of her and looked at her sportswear. You're very active. If my sister were to lose weight herself, she probably wouldn't be able to persevere for a day. Lin Wenwen shrugged and looked at him. That's not necessarily true. What I said was right. Dong Xinshin is not the 17-year-old Dong Xinshin who knows nothing. She may be able to persevere longer than me. She had no choice but to persevere. In order to let Dong Xinshin get some energy from this body to recover, and then find a way to send herself back to time and space 7 years later. She could only do as he said. What's the matter? She looked at Dong Lijia and asked. Dong Lijia looked at her and still didn't give up. Are you a man or not? Tell me your real identity. I'll check if you're lying. If you dare to lie to me, I'll... What? Hit me? You can't beat me, right? Plot against me? That's possible. But I already said I'm not a man. You're really persistent. Besides, even if I'm a man and have sex with your sister, I won't marry her. Even if that's the case, it's still impossible for you to marry her. Besides, have you asked your sister's opinion? You only know how to worry here. Seeing that he still didn't let go of the joke just now, Lin Wenwen raised her hand and pushed him away. She finally felt another advantage of Dong Xinshin's current body. Fat, heavy weight. Although she didn't have that much strength when her lower body was stable, she could knock people away. You wait. After being rebuked by Lin Wenwen, Dong Lijia was even more certain that there was a man living in his sister's body. What a big temper. This is between me and Dong Xinshin. It's better for you to stay out of it. Even my brother isn't like you. Lin Wenwen said with his back facing him as he walked toward the gym. That's because Xinshin is still young and doesn't know anything. No, wait. Don't go yet. In Dong Lijia's heart, his sister was still determined that he should protect her when she was 17 years old. This was his responsibility as an elder brother. But very quickly, he thought of something else and hurriedly called out to her. Then he strode toward her. Now go back and change into a nice dress. Come with me to a place. He walked up and grabbed Lin Wenwen's hand, turning her around to face him. Gown? What the hell? Why would I exchange for that? Lin Wenwen looked at him with a puzzled expression. She suddenly thought of the place he mentioned and asked, Wait, are you taking me to the place where second young Master Luo is? Hearing her words, Dong Lijia immediately showed a surprised expression. Hey, how do you know? Lin Wenwen rolled his eyes and said, It's all because of those two idiot women who called me and told me that I had to go. Although I don't plan to go. Idiot women? Who? Dong Lijia didn't understand who she was talking about for a moment and looked a little confused. Tut, it doesn't matter who it is. The important thing is that you want to take me there. But I won't go. Lin Wenwen said to him firmly and immediately turned to leave. Now, she just wanted to spend her time helping Dong Xinshin recover and sending herself back. She also wanted to buy a bunch of things and put them in her telepathic eye space. Why not? Don't you want to see? Oh no, my Xinshin wants to see Wu Mingho. She begged me to take her there last time. Although you're not her now, you're using her body. You have to help her show her presence in front of Wu Mingho. And I told them that I will take Xin there. How can you not go? Hearing that she didn't want to go, Dong Lijia immediately objected. Then, he jumped in front of her and blocked her way as he spoke. Lin Wenwen was simply annoyed to death by his sister complex. He actually wanted to help his sister show her presence in front of the person she liked. At this time, shouldn't he tell her to focus on her studies and not be distracted by love? So she said that she wouldn't go and didn't want to go. Then Dong Lijia immediately looked at her suspiciously and said, "You don't want to go because you are actually a man? Because your body has become a woman, so you don't want to go?" Lin Wenwen didn't think that he would bring this up again. She simply wanted to kick him away and be done with it. She smiled insincerely and said to him with sparks in her eyes, "Your sister is not interested in this Wu Mingho. Who knows if this Wu Mingho will turn into a zombie in 3 months? I don't want to waste this time. Go away, go away." It was fine if those two women annoyed her, since they couldn't get in front of her anyway. She didn't think that Dong Lijia would be the same as them and annoy her because of the same thing. How can we do that? We called Wu Mingho over because of Xin. If you don't go, won't it be awkward for us? However, Dong Lijia didn't relent. It seemed that he had to get her over. For the sake of his Xin's future mood, it was better to bring her over. Moreover, if she went now and saw Wu Mingho, she might wake up because she saw the person she liked. Thinking of this, Dong Lijia didn't say anything else and immediately pulled Lin Wenwen back to the room to change clothes. Then he pulled, but it didn't budge. He pulled again, but it still didn't budge. 3 pulls. Lin Wenwen looked at him calmly. "Pull, pull, pull. Let's see if you can move her with her current tonnage." Dong Lijia. Damn, he really couldn't pull her. Since he couldn't use force, he could only use his wits. All right, wasn't he in need of money now? "How about this? You come with me. How about tonight? I give you another 500,000. Lin Wenwen. Damn, she really couldn't refuse this condition. 500,000 could buy a lot of food and medicine. She suddenly felt that this Dong Lijia was a bit sneaky. In the end, under the temptation of money, she still agreed. Anyway, it was just 2 hours less of training in the night. It wasn't a delay. Then Dong Lijia raised his eyebrows and smiled proudly. The young and handsome face was filled with the joy of victory, and the suffocation from being suppressed by Lin Wenwen was swept away. Before Lin Wenwen entered the room and saw his smile, she inexplicably had an urge to hit someone. Chapter 1173. When Lin Wenwen was tempted by Dong Lijia's money to attend second young Master Luo's birthday party, Yuan Tianxing asked Olgua to take everyone away from the underground river. He went back to find a place to block the river. When he returned to a position not far from the waterfall, he found that the water flow had slowed down. But the water level did not drop, and after the hole on the top of the waterfall was opened, the water flowing down the waterfall increased. He didn't know where this underground river led to. It would be great if it flowed into the sea. The big puffer fish with tentacles were no longer in front of the hole, but the hole that was originally 2 or 3 meters high was now 7 or 8 meters high. The pool under the waterfall was full of scattered stones. He looked around, and then jumped into the hole he had made in the rock wall. The severe pain from the skin on his shoulder and half of his chest made him groan. He took the flashlight and opened the clothes on his chest. He discovered that there were no burns on his skin. Instead, there was a patch of dark purple on his skin. The dark purple area was extremely painful. He touched it with his hand. As soon as his hand touched the skin, he couldn't help but scream because it was really painful. Yuan Tianxing took a deep breath, then closed his clothes and turned to look at the big hole in the waterfall in the distance. He put the flashlight in his mouth and put one hand on the wall to control the surrounding rocks. He had lost consciousness and couldn't control the hand on the other side of the shoulder. While using a small part of the energy to suppress the explosive energy that invaded his body when the black water splashed on him, Yuan Tianxing conducted most of the energy into the wall and then transferred it to the rock wall at the entrance of the hole. Then he began to use energy to control the formation of a large range of rocks around the hole. When facing the rocks onto the ground, the earth ability could freely control their movement and growth. But the rocks here had been corroded by the river, and the rocks were full of the impact of a lot of the river's energy. That was why this energy weakened Yuan Tianqing's ability to control these rocks. Yuan Tianqing pressed alone on a rock wall, his physical body running at a high speed to transmit energy, and then used his mind to control the energy around to move the rocks on the waterfall. He saw that the rocks at the edge of the hole, which were a little rough and messy, began to slowly thicken and extend up and down. The stones below grow up, and the stones above grow down. The stone cracks on both sides began to close up and became thicker and thicker. Yuan Tianqing did not intend to block the entire river. If he blocked it, the water pressure that flowed down from the back would accumulate, and after a long time, it might explode here. Because there was still corrosive energy in the water, these rocks could not block the water forever. Therefore, he left a small hole, but the stones around the hole became very thick towards the lake, and they were so strong that the big monsters couldn't break them. After continuously increasing the thickness of the rocks inside to more than 20 meters, Yuan Tianqing was already sweating profusely. However, he still gritted his teeth and finally thickened the rock to more than 30 meters. Then, water flowed out of a tunnel that was 30 meters in length and 1 meter in diameter. After letting go, Yuan Tianqing immediately leaned against the wall and sat down. He leaned against the wall and panted heavily, but his expression was somewhat painful. His energy was almost used up, so he suppressed the energy in his injured area and reduced it a little. The energy of the river immediately began to collide with his flesh. It had almost corroded his flesh and blood. Watching the water flow on the waterfall become smaller, the water level in the pool began to slowly decline. Yuan Tianqing observed the lake inside the cave for a long time, and noticed that the breath of those things seemed to have sunk to the bottom of the lake. Then, he gritted his teeth and jumped out of here. He followed his own breath back, and increasingly felt that his body movements were not smooth. The pain on the skin of his chest was slowly invading his internal cavity, and even made it a little difficult for him to breathe. Moreover, the oxygen underground was already a little thin, and now it made him feel even more uncomfortable. Fortunately, his will was still strong, and he forced himself to endure the physical discomfort and kept rushing back. However, his speed was much slower than before, and his footsteps were a little unsteady. Old Gua and the others waited for Yuan Tianqing at the entrance of the underground river where the underground gorillas entered the underground river. Suddenly, he slightly raised his head to the direction of the underground river upstream, and slightly frowned. He's back. Although he had returned, why did his aura suddenly weaken so much? This degree of breath, he was afraid that he would not be able to hold on much longer. Feeling that something was wrong, Old Gua immediately flashed and disappeared in place. When the others heard his voice, they all perked up. However, seeing that the old man suddenly disappeared in place, they did not immediately understand the meaning of his action. Only Li Zheng's reaction was a little faster, and he suddenly had a bad feeling. His expression also became solemn. Soon, Old Mengguo returned with Yuan Tianqing. However, Yuan Tianqing was lying on his shoulder, and his entire head was hanging down. Deputy Leader, Li Zheng and the others were shocked, and they all shouted out loud. He fainted. Quickly send him back, Old Gua said in a low voice, but his footsteps did not stop, and he continued to jump into the underground gorilla's cave. The others quickly followed one after another. What's wrong with Deputy Leader? What happened? Li Zheng also moved quickly next to Old Gua and asked anxiously. There's the energy breath in his body like in the river, and he has expended too much energy. So in order to suppress and resist this external invasion of destructive energy, his body automatically fell into a coma to protect itself, Old Gua said. Expended too much energy? Deputy Leader is already a level 7 supernatural ability, and he can actually use energy to the point of light. What is he doing in there? Li Zheng said worriedly and confusedly. Fortunately, when they came out, they all came out through the biggest tunnel in the underground gorilla's cave, and they quickly came out of the ground. After smelling their breath, Elmar immediately flashed out. How is it? Did you guys find anything? What's going on with Yuan Tianqing? As she spoke, she suddenly saw Yuan Tianqing being carried by Old Gua, and immediately realized that something was wrong. He's injured. The others will tell you the situation. Call Lu Shamlin first, and let her send Yuan Tianqing back to the base's medical department. Old Gua placed Yuan Tianqing under Li Zheng, and then said to Elmarch. Lu Shamlin was a level 5 female zombie leader on Elmar's side, and at this time, they definitely needed a wind ability user to directly send Yuan Tianqing back to the base. Elmar turned her head and roared to the side. Roar dash, Lu Shamlin, come quickly. Soon, an average-looking female zombie wearing a camouflage military uniform of medium height appeared in front of everyone. Elmar immediately pointed at Yuan Tianqing and said to her, Hurry, send it back to the base's medical department to Lin Hao. Roar. Lu Shamlin immediately responded to her and turned around to walk towards Yuan Tianqing. She picked up his arm and put it on her shoulder, and in the blink of an eye, disappeared. Li Zheng and the others immediately found their parked cars, and then quickly drove back to the base. Chapter 1174. After Yuan Tianqing passed out, Lin Wenwen, who was dragged to Luo Yunjuan's birthday party by Dong Lijia, suddenly felt her heart skip a beat. She was standing in the corner of the party with a glass of red wine in her hand. The strange feeling in her heart made her raise her hand and press her chest. Then she frowned. An inexplicable feeling of suffocation spread from her heart and then quickly disappeared. But after that, she had a bad premonition in her heart. She raised her head and looked around, trying to figure out where this feeling was coming from. It was a very strange feeling. It didn't feel like she was being targeted or plotted against. It was as if something bad was about to happen that she couldn't predict. Suddenly, her mind became blurry, and a blurry image flashed by. In the image, there was a man with dark purple skin lying quietly. But before she could see the man's face clearly, the image suddenly disappeared. Lin Wenwen covered her forehead with her free hand. She felt that the man was very important to her, but she didn't know who it was. The image flashed by so fast that she couldn't see the man's face at all. She couldn't even see his figure clearly. On a seat not far from Lin Wenwen's right, a few elegantly dressed girls with exquisite makeup were secretly sizing up Lin Wenwen. Why doesn't she go near Wu Mingho? Why is she just standing there? Why is she covering her forehead? Qin Jiao stared at Lin Wenwen from the corner of her eyes, but she was facing the others. Lin Yuehui looked at the direction where the handsome men were gathered and looked at Deng Qinfei with infatuation. Hearing Qin Jiao's words, she turned around and glanced at where Lin Wenwen was and said, Why don't we go over and pretend to drag her over there? Isn't it natural for us to use her to get close to Qinfei and the others? Qin Jiao's eyes lit up and she nodded. Sure. A short-haired girl next to them looked at the two of them and then at Lin Wenwen. She said, This fat girl is really brave to come. She'll just embarrass herself in this kind of situation. But she did choose a more suitable dress today, although it feels like she's wearing a mosquito net when she goes out. The other one excitedly urged Qin Jiao and the other girl, Hey, you two better hurry up if you want to move. I'm still waiting to watch a good show. It just so happened that Wu Mingho was wearing white today. How cooperative. Hee hee. Qin Jiao stood up and said, Let's go. She doesn't look right now. Let's go see what's wrong with her. Lin Wenwen was covering her forehead, trying to sense the ominous feeling, but the image was too blurry. She really couldn't see anything. A man? Why is his entire body dark purple? Could he have been poisoned? Who could it be? Recalling the strange feeling in his heart just now, the other party was definitely someone related to him. Could be her big brother? Did something happen to Lin Hao? Damn it, her second ability didn't react at all. Now that there was finally some reaction, the result was this. Was it because she hadn't finished leveling up yet? Feeling the two women walking towards him, Lin Wenwen's heart inexplicably flashed a trace of irritation. Did they think that she couldn't feel the way these women looked at her just now? The calculating look in their eyes was too clear. There was no concealment at all. Now that they suddenly walked towards her, they were ready to take action. Originally, she wanted to carefully look for clues about the scene in her mind. She knew that the scene in her mind was definitely not an illusion, especially since it happened to someone she knew and someone she cared about. But at this time, someone actually wanted to disturb her. Lin Wenwen turned around and walked in the opposite direction of Qin Jiao and Lin Hao. Originally, they didn't want to provoke her. Tonight, they just wanted to eat some food and drink some wine. She wanted to enjoy the scene that hadn't existed since the end of the world. However, there was still someone who was crazy and wanted to find trouble with her. Lin Wenwen turned around not because she was afraid of the other party, but because it was too troublesome to deal with them. It was better to escape. This kind of situation was too troublesome for women. Qin Jiao and Lin Hao pretended to walk unintentionally towards Lin Wenwen, but the other party's figure suddenly disappeared. Then he went in the direction of the washroom. A trace of displeasure and depression flashed in their hearts at the same time. Why couldn't he go to the washroom at any time? Why did he have to make a move? Seeing that Lin Wenwen had entered the washroom, Qin Jiao and Lin Yuehui could only secretly look at each other. Then they walked towards the wine table. Lin Wenwen sat on the toilet seat in the washroom and carefully thought about the scene just now. The man was lying down. She couldn't see his figure or height, but the dark purple body was too conspicuous. Who was it? What happened to him? Was the situation serious? Was he going to die? These questions filled her mind, and Lin Wenwen felt a little uneasy. No, she had to go back as soon as possible. She had to go back as soon as possible. The more she thought about it, the more uneasy she felt. Lin Wenwen suddenly stood up from the toilet seat. She directly opened the door and walked out. After washing her hands, she took the coarse paper from the washroom and dried her hands. Then she walked out. As soon as she walked out, she saw Qin Jiao and Lin Hao standing not far away. When they saw her come out, they immediately turned around. Xin, you don't look too good. What's wrong? Lin Yuehui looked at Lin Wenwen worriedly. Did you eat something bad? Are you okay? Qin Jiao helped to comfort her. Lin Wenwen expressionlessly shook her head and said, I'm fine. Thank you for your concern. After saying that, she walked towards where Dong Lijia and the others were. Qin Jiao and Lin Hao looked at each other behind her and saw where she was going. Then they followed her. Why do I feel that your sister is strange tonight? On the other side, Dong Lijia and the others were also talking about his sister. The feeling that Dong Xin gave them tonight was a little strange. Moreover, his style of dressing had changed a lot. It was not like the unbearable style of before. Dong Lijia rolled his eyes and watched Lin Wenwen walk towards the washroom. In his mind, he was thinking that this bastard used his sister's body to enter the women's washroom. Although there seemed to be nothing wrong on the surface, he remembered that there was a man living in his sister's heart. It was so fucking perverted. After hearing Luo Yuanjuan's words, he replied nonchalantly, Oh, maybe his brain short-circuited. Maybe his way of looking at things suddenly changed. However, as soon as he finished speaking, everyone else stared at him. Dong Lijiao was stunned by their stares. Huh? Why are you looking at me? Did I say something wrong? The others just looked at him silently and did not say anything. He had always praised his sister. Why would he say that his beloved sister's brain short-circuited? Dong Lijia was also strange tonight. Chapter 1175. Lin Wenwen walked up to Dong Lijia and directly ignored the other high-quality handsome men. He said to Dong Lijia, I'm going back. You guys have fun. Then, she glanced at them indifferently and was about to leave. She was not in the mood to stay here anymore. Hey, fatball, you just arrived, haven't you? Why are you leaving so soon? That's so rude of you. A sunny young boy next to Dong Lijia heard her say that she wanted to leave and immediately said with some dissatisfaction. He made it clear that he was the host of this place, Luo Yuanjun, and he was the star of the show tonight. Dong Lijia had only brought Lin Wenwen here for less than 10 minutes, but Lin Wenwen said that she was leaving. It was indeed rude of her. Lin Wenwen glanced at him indifferently and then ignored him. If she remembered correctly, Dong Xin had asked her to beat this guy. How did Luo Yuanjun annoy her? Was it because he called Dong Xinxin fatball? Why are you leaving so soon? Do you think you're here to watch the show? Dong Lijia was displeased to see that she was leaving so soon. He hadn't even talked to Wu Mingho, and she was leaving? Wouldn't it be a waste of time? Lin Wenwen spread out her hands. I've promised you, and I'm already here. But I didn't promise you how long I would stay. That was to say, she was already here, so she couldn't go back on her words. As for when she would leave, it had nothing to do with him. Yes, Xin, you've just arrived, haven't you? Why are you leaving so soon? The first round isn't over yet, and there's still the second round. The second round is our home court. Qin Jiao pulled Lin Yuehui over. After hearing their conversation, she immediately helped Dong Lijia. The venue was held in a high-end hotel because the host was not Luo Yuanjun himself, but his father. Therefore, most of the people present were old, middle-aged people with high social status or some business leaders. Only at 10 o'clock after the first round was over, the young people would find a place to have the second round. Therefore, the second round was what they wanted. However, Dong Xinxin was about to leave before the first round was over. It would be too early if he didn't go to the second round. Lin Wenwen smiled faintly and said, "Forget about the second round. You don't have to count me in. You can still have fun, right? Anyway, it doesn't matter if I'm here or not. There's an impact. It's affecting my mood. Come, Pang Xiao, tell me, why did you go back so early? If you go back early, you'll just be lying on the bed. Why do you pamper your fat body so much? You guys should train them." Seeing that Lin Wenwen was not joking and that he really wanted to go back, Luo Yuanjun immediately stood up from the sofa and strode over. Naturally, he reached out and wrapped his arms around Lin Wenwen's neck, teasing her. If it was the Dong Xinxin of the past, he would have exploded long ago when he heard him keep mentioning his body. However, the one who came here today was not Dong Xinxin, but Lin Wenwen. She suddenly looked at Luo Yuanjun with a smile and said, "It's none of your business how I pamper them and train them. Just take care of yourself. Don't worry about others." Then, she turned her head and said to Dong Lijia, "That's it. I'll go first." Then, she turned around and walked out of the door, shaking Dong Xinxin's fat body. Dong Lijia looked at her huge back and thought that what she had just said was right. Then, he looked at Wu Mingho, who didn't seem to care about Dong Xinxin at all. He didn't even look at Dong Xinxin. After thinking about it, he still chased after her. Luo Yuanjun, who was behind him, pointed at Deng Xinfei and said, "Dong Xinxin is really weird tonight. What's going on?" Deng Xinfei looked at the door and said, "It's not just tonight." Luo Yuanjun looked at him blankly and said, "What?" Qin Jiao and Lin Yuehui also looked at Lin Wenwen's back in a daze. They couldn't believe that she really left like that. She's really gone? If she left, what fun would there be? Not to mention the second scene. The first scene hadn't even started yet. How could she leave? Thinking of this, the two immediately followed Dong Lijia out. After Lin Wenwen walked out of the entrance of the venue, his bodyguard followed him. Anyway, she had a car to pick her up when she went out, so she didn't have to worry about how she would go back. Dong Lijia caught up with her and stopped her, saying, "Wait a minute, are you serious? Don't you think others will think of Xinxin if you leave like this? They will have a bad impression of her, you know?" Lin Wenwen looked back at him and said indifferently, "Do you think it's fun for me to come here? It's not your sister who is in this body now. What's the point of me coming here to make others like her? Let her do her own thing in the future. I think you should stop interfering with her life. It may not be good for her." Fortunately, Lin Feng wasn't like that, or she would be annoyed to death. Even if Dong Xinxin really liked Wu Mingho in the past, he was no longer the Dong Xinxin of the past. He probably didn't like Wu Mingho anymore. Therefore, Lin Wenwen felt that there was really no need for her to come here, if not for the fact that she needed money to buy gas now. He wouldn't come here with Dong Lijia. Hearing Lin Wenwen's indifferent words, Dong Lijia was stunned. Looking at the other person turn around and leave again, he just stood there quietly. He suddenly had a feeling of realization. Did he really ignore his baby sister's feelings in the past? And she was right. The one who came back now was Dong Xinxin after 7 years. His heart was no longer the same. Qin Jiao, who followed him out, saw Dong Lijia standing at the side of the corridor. They looked around but didn't see Dong Xin. Li Jia, did you let your sister go? Why didn't you ask her to stay? Qin Jiao's face darkened a little, but she had to continue talking to Dong Li Jia with a fake smile. Although they were talking to Dong Li Jia, their eyes were searching left and right. Their expressions were secretly annoyed, and their hearts were full of anger. Originally, they planned to let her accidentally fall in front of Wu Mingho when there were a lot of people. If she fell with such a heavy weight, it would be an earthquake. At that time, everyone's attention would be attracted to her. Wouldn't that be a funny scene? When they went to a nightclub for the second time, they could even make her drink. It was said that when she was drunk, she would go crazy and kiss everyone she saw. So when they got her drunk, there would be a good show to watch. However, they didn't expect that they would spend a lot of effort to make Luo Yuanjun call Dong Li Jia and ask him to bring his sister here. In the end, he left after standing there for less than 10 minutes. He was so angry. He hadn't done anything yet. Chapter 1176. After Yuan Tianxing was sent back to the base, he immediately called someone to find Lin Hao. Lin Hao spent the whole night in the emergency room using his ability, but he still couldn't force the explosive energy out of Yuan Tianxing's body. The next day, Lin Hao was sweating profusely. He could only temporarily suppress Yuan Tianxing's injuries. Then, he used Lin Xiao's spatial lake water to soak Yuan Tianxing's entire body. Only after soaking Yuan Tianxing's entire body in the water could he completely stop the strange energy from spreading in his body. When Lin Hao came out of the ward with a tired face, everyone immediately looked at him carefully and expectantly. His body has a very strong, explosive energy. Basically, half of the muscle cells in his chest have exploded, and his bones have also suffered some damage. Fortunately, his own energy automatically protected his liver and heart, so the energy didn't invade them. Otherwise, his life wouldn't be able to wait for the leader's return. Lin Hao said to everyone with a serious expression. Elmar and Gizergua went down to take a look and found that the entrance to the waterfall was blocked by Deputy Leader Yuan using his ability. I'm guessing he spent too much of his supernatural energy there, causing his injuries to worsen. While waiting for Yuan Tianxing's treatment, Li Zheng received a message from Elmarch. Lin Feng frowned and said, "Then you mean he still needs to wait for the leader to come back? You can't do anything here?" Lin Hao shook his head. "My ability is too weak in suppressing the energy in Brother Tianxing's body. We can only wait for the leader to come back." He couldn't control the spatial lake water left by Lin Xiao to treat Yuan Tianxing, and if it wasn't for the energy in the lake water, he wouldn't be able to do anything about the abnormal destructive energy in Yuan Tianxing's body. Hearing Lin Hao's words, everyone's faces became very disappointed and worried. You mean with his current situation, he can only wait for the leader to come back for a change? Lin Feng thought about it and asked Lin Hao. "That's right, but I can't judge whether this is a good or bad thing. But I think the leader should have a way." Lin Hao's words meant that he could only place his hope on Lin Xiao. Lin Feng looked up at the door of the ward, then sighed and turned to leave. After Lin Xiao left, something happened to Lin Wenwen and Yuan Tianxing one after another. This really wasn't a good sign. There were also more and more unsettling factors appearing underground. He felt that a huge crisis was slowly approaching. In any case, even the apocalypse had come, and the virus had broken out twice. Lin Feng suddenly realized that he was already somewhat used to this kind of catastrophic situation. Meanwhile, in Lin Xiao's home, Wu Qingyue was nursing Tingting while listening to Xiao Liqing tell him about the news from various places. So, Xikong Chun returned empty-handed. Wu Qingyue took the bottle and tried to stuff it into Tung Tung's mouth, but Tung Tung dodged left and right, not wanting to eat the bottle, and struggled on his legs. Probably. Anyway, the news said that they came out first. Miss Lu and Lan Lu haven't come out yet. Also, the aura of that level 9 Arcanist has stopped rampaging, which means that he has been knocked unconscious. Xiao Liqing stood in front of him and looked at Tung Tung, who was running around in his boss's arms. The corners of his mouth twitched as he reported the situation. With Lan Lu here, He definitely won't let anyone kill that 9th rank Arcanist. Also, after that female zombie arrived, he stopped rampaging. Looks like she should have helped. After all, her invisibility skill could have gotten very close to the back of the Berserk Arcanist. Alright, Tung Tung, are you going to drink or not? You're really troublesome. Wu Chungyue thought about it, and after analyzing the situation, he came to the conclusion he had imagined. However, he was a little angry at the disobedient little brat in his arms. I don't want a bottle. I don't want a bottle. Put in a bowl for me to drink. Tung Tung turned his body and used the back of his head to face him and shouted, "It will get cold very quickly if you put it in a bowl, and the cold milk will have a fishy smell. When the time comes, you won't drink it again. Hurry up. I'm going to be angry." Although Wu Chungyue had a straight face, his tone was still very gentle. The weather was already very cold. The end of November was approaching December, and the temperature was very low during the day and at night. This little brat had not been eating seriously recently. The milk that was brewed for him always turned cold after a few mouthfuls. Then he would shout that it wasn't good to drink something. What a troublesome little brat. Putting it in a bottle could at least keep it warm, but this little brat refused to drink it no matter what. "I don't want it. Just pour it into a bowl. I will definitely finish it." Tung Tung still refused. Wu Yueling, who was at the side, obediently ate her food, and from time to time raised her head to look at the father and son. Her expression was very relaxed, and there was even a hint of a smile at the corner of her mouth. Wu Qingyue sighed and could only pour out the milk in the bottle. Then he asked Xiao Liqing, "By the way, did you find the information on that level 9 paranormal?" Xiao Liqing nodded. "I found it. His name is Dong Xiaowei. However, I heard that the location of Qingshan Base is rather remote, and it seems to be in a mental hospital in a town. Dong Xiaowei, Lan Lu, and the others were actually patients with some mental illness in the past, but I don't know why they have become normal now. Maybe the energy of the paranormal ability repaired their mental domain. And Lan Lu is also a mental type," Wu Chungyue said. "With the current situation, I don't know when Miss Lu will return to the base. The situation underground is not very clear. Maybe she will be able to find out something from those gorillas when she returns." Xiao Liqing said with a slight frown. "It's been a night, and Lin Hao still hasn't come out. It seems that Yuan Tianxing's injuries are very serious. Even a level 7 paranormal was so seriously injured, the situation underground is definitely not simple. But where did that energy come from?" Wu Qingyue already knew the purpose of Yuan Tianxing's operation, and also the result. However, he did not personally go down to check, so his understanding of the situation was still a little vague. But even the level 7 paranormal Yuan Tianxing came back with serious injuries, which meant that the situation underground was not only dangerous, but also a big problem. And this big problem was slowly spreading to the surface. Could it be that something has changed underground that has caused these phenomena to appear? But if that's the case, it seems that this kind of change is very dangerous for us humans and other creatures. Xiao Liqing's thoughts were also in line with his. Our senses are not as sensitive as those zombies, but even Xiu Lily and Elmar can't detect it. This means that the situation is not critical. We should still have some time. Xiao Tung, can you drink your milk? Why are you looking at me? I'm already full." As Wu Qingyue spoke, he lowered his head and glared at the little ghost in his arms. Chapter 1177. The news from the northwest took a little longer due to the distance, so Wu Qingyue only just found out that Sikong Chun had retreated. Lin Xiao was already on the way back with her troops. A slightly modified convoy was still moving at high speed on the highway, but the last car had a big mushroom growing on top of it. It was blown by the wind, but it still stood firmly on top. Oh, in Lin Xiao's car, a young tiger was pouncing on the side of the window, roaring out from time to time. Lin Xiao sat in the passenger seat and turned her head to the back and said, "Can you be quiet? You won't be able to run for long, even if you aren't tired. I am." The little tiger's running speed wasn't slow, but it was still too small, so it didn't have enough stamina. If it was released to run behind the convoy, it would only be able to run for half an hour before collapsing. The mushroom also liked to run, but after running for a few hours, it jumped onto the roof of the car and refused to move. Only Wang and He were leisurely running in the woods by the roadside. Because of their level 6 stamina, they could run for a few days and nights without stopping, and the speed of the car wasn't very fast. To them, it was like jogging. In fact, the mushroom was the same, but it seemed to be tired of running away. After Lin Xiao said that, the little tiger turned its head and roared at her. Then, he lay on the chair and flicked his tail left and right. When do you think Blue Land will find a level 8 energy core for you? Duan asked while driving. It shouldn't be long, didn't you notice? After the second outbreak of the virus, the strength of the mutant beasts and plants increased, and their speed of leveling up also increased. Otherwise, how could we see 2 level 8 mutant beasts together? Now the frequency of level 6 and 7 mutant beasts is quite high. Lin Xiao looked out of the window and said lightly, "That seems to be true." Duan thought about it and realized that it was true. However, the speed of human mutants has slowed down, while the zombies have increased. Lin Xiao continued. Suddenly, she looked at the road in front of her and said, "Stop the car." Screech. Duan slammed on the brakes and stared in front of her in confusion. She then turned to look at her. "What's wrong?" Woo woo woo. The little tiger behind suddenly let out a low warning sound. Duan looked in the rearview mirror and saw that it had begun to shrink. Its back was arched, its limbs were tucked under its body, and its tail was curled under its belly. He bared his teeth, and the 2 round little ears on his head were pressed down. His eyes seemed to have seen something terrifying, and he revealed a somewhat panicked expression. "There's something in front." With a serious expression, Lin Xiao opened the car door and got out. He stood beside the car and began to carefully observe the surroundings. They were on a highway with mountains on both sides. There were no towns nearby, so it was a bit desolate. Lin Xiao felt a familiar, yet uneasy aura slowly approaching them. However, she could not sense the source of this aura. She sniffed the air around her, but there was nothing out of the ordinary. However, she could still feel that something was approaching. "What is it?" Duan also got out of the car and walked to her side. She carefully looked around and asked. Lin Xiao raised her hand and directly put the little tiger and the car in her space. Then, she shouted to the people behind, "Be careful." After everyone got out of the car, Lin Xiao put all the cars in her space one by one, leaving only the people outside. After hearing Lin Xiao shout, everyone immediately focused their attention and vigilantly observed their surroundings. At this moment, there was a slight tremor on the ground of the highway. Underground, Li Kuei looked down at the ground and said aloud. Everyone could already feel the tremor coming from underground and not above ground. Lin Xiao frowned, and suddenly, a bad feeling flashed through her heart. "Everyone be careful. The thing coming down might be the same type as those multi-eyed monsters." She reminded everyone, then jumped up and landed on top of a tall, mutated tree in the forest not far away. She stood tall and was ready to wait for the thing underground to appear. When everyone saw what she did, they all followed suit and jumped onto some tall trees. After waiting for a full 10 minutes, the ground of the highway began to shake violently, and then cracks began to appear on the road. The cracks were slowly getting bigger and bigger, and a dangerous and disgusting aura gushed out of the cracks along with a thick black gas. "What is that?" Shui Mingjun frowned and asked in confusion. Ink, who was standing on the same branch as him, said expressionlessly, "I don't know. It probably isn't anything good. The smell is disgusting." Saying that, she frowned and moved her nose, but in the end, she couldn't help but pinch it with her hand. Looking at the others, all the zombies were covering their noses with their hands. Shui Mingjun sniffed strangely and then said, "Why do you all seem to smell a very bad smell? Why can't I smell it?" Ink looked at him and said in a nasal voice, "Because you're not a zombie. Do you want to try becoming like us?" Shui Mingjun shook his head repeatedly. No need." Lin Xiao also covered her nose. It was a strange smell that was very pungent to her. It was very unpleasant and irritating to their noses. It was also very disgusting. Woof, woof, woof. Woof, woof. Wang was also jumping left and right on the side of the road, barking at the cracks with his teeth. Only the mushroom spirit and the big black snake slipped into the forest and disappeared, not knowing where they went. Obviously, they felt that it was too dangerous here and they couldn't handle it, so they didn't dare to stay. Could it be the thing you guys saw before? Duan stood on the same tree as Lin Xiao, but her position was lower than Lin Xiao. She squatted on the branch and looked down at the situation on the other side of the highway. Lin Xiao shook her head. Her eyes were a little more alert as she stared at the cracks on the road, and said, "No, the aura is different. And the energy in this black gas is also different. It doesn't seem to be the same species." The ground was still shaking, and the cracks were getting bigger and bigger. The black gas that gushed out of the ground began to spread in all directions. Lin Xiao carefully stared at the plants that the black gas came into contact with, and sure enough, the situation that she saw with the multi-eyed monster appeared. The plants instantly lost their vitality and withered, but the surroundings didn't turn pitch black like the area with the multi-eyed monster. Instead, it was a dim yellow. After the plants withered, they instantly turned into yellow sand and dust that scattered in the air. The air quality in this area instantly dropped. Chapter 1178. Duan quickly took out an isolation mask and put it on, preventing herself from breathing in the poisonous gas. It was common sense to wear an anti-gas mask when walking outside a survivor's camp. Everyone would carry a mask that could be worn in case of any poisonous gas. Shui Mingjun and Yin Huiguang, who often walked outside, silently took out their own equipment and put it on. As the black gas grew more and more, the surrounding plants began to turn into sand and were blown away by the wind, gradually forming a barren land. This time, it's actually this kind of effect. Lin Xiao looked at the changes in the surroundings. As the gas grew more and more, it began to spread with the wind, gradually extending towards the tree they were standing on. Lin Xiao and Duan leapt backwards, quickly leaving their original position. They watched as the surrounding trees began to gradually dry up and turn into sand. Only a few higher-level mutated plants were still tenaciously holding on. Very quickly, the surrounding mutated plants all turned into sand and scattered, leaving only 2 level 4 and 5 mutated trees. They were constantly releasing the energy within their energy cores to resist the destructive energy of the black gas, ensuring their own safety. However, if there came a day when their energy was completely released, then it would be time for them to wither and die. What the hell is coming out? How can this gas have such terrifying energy? Duan retreated a few hundred meters away and landed on another tree with Lin Xiao. She then looked at the surroundings that were gradually turning into sand, and her eyes revealed a bewildered expression. Lin Xiao flashed and stood firmly on the tree, silently staring at the cracks in the ground. After a few seconds, she suddenly opened her mouth and said, "It's coming out." The others landed not far away from her, and after hearing her words, they all stared at the location of the cracks. Very quickly, the cracks in the ground that were emitting black gas had split open a few meters wide. The entire 200 to 300 meters of the road was filled with such huge cracks, and the tremors underground had also stopped. Roar dash! A strange sound came out from underground. After everyone heard this strange sound, they all focused their gazes. They saw a huge blood-red claw extend out from the cracks, and with a boom sound, it scratched the ground. A few deep claw marks were left on the concrete asphalt road. Red? And the claw is so big. Lin Xiao squinted his eyes when he saw the claw. This red claw was at least as big as a small car, and its thick clawed arm pushed upwards forcefully. A huge red head squeezed out from the crack in the ground. It was a strange-looking head, with 2 curved horns on its head and 2 small round ears below the horns. 2 large blood-red eyes were looking around. The claws that were a few meters long were already very big, but this giant head seemed to be at least 3 times the size of the claws. Even the width of the crack in the ground was not enough for its entire head to come out, and it had to be squeezed out. As for what this head looked like, it was actually a bit like a feline, just that it didn't have fluffy fur. Both its head and its claws were covered with thick, blood-red skin. However, the vertical pupil in the middle of its round red eyes made it look like a huge, strange cat. Oh, whoa. The strange red cat opened its huge mouth and roared at the sky, revealing a mouthful of sharp teeth. When it roared, it even spat out a thick black gas from its mouth. Then it began to struggle and stretched out another claw, then a third, and a fourth. A fifth. Don't tell me they are all its claws. When Yin Xiao saw the appearance of the fifth claw, she suddenly had a bad feeling. Then she saw the huge cat's struggle became even more intense, and the crack in the ground was slowly pushed open by it, revealing the rest of its body. Suddenly, it shrank down slightly, and then rushed out with a loud noise. Bang! After the crack in the road exploded, its body finally jumped out from the ground. Roar! A six-legged, blood-red, hairless, huge cat swung its snake-like tail and landed on the ground. It seemed to be very excited as it roared at the sky. Then it swung its tail a few times in the same place before stopping and moving its nose to sniff the surrounding air. Seeing its actions, everyone around it subconsciously held their breaths and restrained their aura. They were afraid that it would suddenly discover them and pounce on them to eat. However, this monster with 6 claws, a height of at least 7 to 8 meters, a body length of more than 10 meters, and a tail that was more than 20 meters long, only sniffed the surrounding air before leaping in another direction without any interest. When it leaped more than 20 meters into the air, it suddenly disappeared into thin air. It disappeared. Everyone was a little stunned by this phenomenon. They thought that after this guy came out, it might cause some commotion in the area, or cause a huge commotion. But after it came out, it only spun a few rounds on the spot, then jumped into the air and disappeared. Lin Xiao frowned and continued to stare at the ground, only to find that the bottom of the crack had returned to a calm state. She carefully stared at the hole that the strange cat crawled out of. Suddenly, her eyes flashed, and she turned her head in another direction. There, a mutated giant bird flew out from a deserted tree, then flew in a circle in the air, and then flew back to the ground. Lin Xiao stared at the giant bird seriously, and found that the giant bird stood on the ground that had turned into sand, but there was no change at all. The bird's level was actually not high. It was only level 2, but stood there safe and sound, not affected by the situation of the desertification. Puff, puff, puff. A few sounds came from the other side. Then, the giant bird spread its wings and flew toward the place where the sounds came from. Oh, after the giant bird flapped its wings there, it grabbed the sand with its claws, then suddenly flew up into the sky. She saw its claws hook up a mutated rabbit the size of a normal medium-sized dog, flew into the sky, and then flew away. Alive? Lin Xiao murmured in a strange voice. What alive? Duan asked her strangely. That bird and the rabbit. The bird is only level 2, and the rabbit doesn't even have a level. It's just a mutation. But they are fine within the range of the black gas. Lin Xiao pointed to the giant bird that flew away and said, this meant that the black gas seemed to only react to plants. It had no effect on living creatures. Is that so? Duan looked at the direction she pointed, puzzled, and then turned to look at the area that had a radius of more than 300 meters that was covered in yellow sand. Then, she suddenly saw a few mice that were bigger than normal cats jump out of the sand and run into the surrounding forest. It really seemed like nothing happened. Chapter 1179. After the 6-legged hairless monster cat came out, the underground resumed its activity. Only cracks were left there, and the big hole that was squeezed open by the strange cat, indicating that something had just come out of the ground. Did that monster fly away? Yin Xiao and Jing Yin landed on a tree next to where Lin Xiao was. They watched the monster disappear in the air and muttered to themselves. Lin Xiao shook her head. No, it just jumped away. It didn't fly away, but because it was too fast, so fast that the others couldn't see its trajectory before it disappeared. She lowered her head to look at the quiet hole in the ground. Then, with a leap, she suddenly flashed to the road that was in a mess. Leader, seeing Lin Xiao suddenly run to the center of the accident, the others were shocked. They were afraid that she would turn into sand like the trees. Lin Xiao waved her hand with her back facing them and gestured for them not to worry. She squatted down in a crack on the ground and looked down, then stood up again. Other than the black gas that continued to come out from the crack, there was no longer any dangerous aura. This meant that there was nothing left underground. There was only one. Why was there only one? Lin Xiao felt it was strange, but after carefully looking down for a while, she didn't feel any aura anymore. There was no longer any sense of threat down there. She stood up and looked down at her body. Lin Xiao looked in the direction where the monster cat's aura had disappeared and waved to the others. Let's go. Lin Xiao looked at the direction where the strange cat's aura had disappeared and waved at everyone. Let's go. The others immediately followed her and rushed to the road ahead. After leaving the decertified area, Lin Xiao released the car from the space. They continued to drive forward and rushed back to the base. In the base, Lin Feng sat in the office with a gloomy expression. He frowned as he looked at the information Yuan Tianxing and the others brought back. He carefully analyzed the other information revealed by the incident. Since those things could make the underground gorillas, who lived underground, come to the surface where sunlight would kill them, they would be able to survive. In addition, the energy that Old Mingua and the others felt in the underground river was harmful to many creatures on the surface. Therefore, it was needless to say for humans. This meant that it posed a great threat to the universal being base, which was only a few dozen kilometers away, even though the energy had yet to leak out of the ground. But in the future, it was hard to say. They had yet to figure out what was going on underground, and Yuan Tianxing was injured and unconscious. Many things in the base were handed over to Lin Feng to handle, but fortunately, there was still Chen Yuding to help. Otherwise, Lin Feng would be too busy with the official business of the base. The thousands of human survivors in the base were still able to receive a portion of adequate food every day. Those who had the ability could also take missions out of the base and then come back to the base to exchange for points. On the other hand, Wushan's plantation base not only provided food for the people in his own base, but also for the people in Sea City. In fact, they had already harvested a lot of food, and the planting area was still expanding under Lu Jun's management. Is there any progress on Miss Wenwen's clues? Chen Yuding brought some documents to Lin Feng for him to review and asked when he saw Lin Feng's tightly furrowed brows. Lin Feng shook his head. Not at all, but now everyone thinks that it's more likely that she was brought into the space by her ability. In order to feel more at ease, we also think so, but we can't predict when she will come back. It's just that apart from this possibility, we've also prepared for even worse scenarios. Although we have sent a large number of people out to investigate, the result is still the same. Saying that, he sighed and leaned back. He closed his eyes slightly, and his face showed that he was in low spirits. Haven't you contacted the leader? Chen Yuding asked again. The current problem in the base wasn't big, and little Lin Feng couldn't solve it now. But they needed their leader to come back. How can it be so fast? If she found it, she would probably rush back directly. And Lila just left last night. Even if she flew now, she wouldn't be able to reach the northwest. Lin Feng closed his eyes and said with a deep sense of exhaustion. Chen Yuding looked at him silently for a while and sighed. After thinking for a while, he said, I don't know how Haiqing plans to react to the situation in China. Xikong Chen doesn't intend to hide his thoughts anymore. I heard that he's been in frequent contact with other countries recently. It seems that he will take action soon. Speaking of the situation in China, Chen Yuding's voice became serious. Lin Feng felt a headache when he heard the news in China, but it wasn't up to him to deal with. After thinking for a while, he threw it aside and said, Who cares? No matter what, Wu Qingyue is still there. Now that our own matters are so troublesome, who has the time to care about them? Let's talk about it when the time comes. Xikong Chen won't take action directly now. At this moment, Shun Yuzhen suddenly rushed over. She knocked on the door and immediately came in. Look, it seems that the situation has become more serious. She came in with 2 pieces of paper and placed them on the table in front of Lin Feng. Lin Feng opened his eyes and looked at her with some confusion. Seeing that she was so anxious, it seemed that the situation was indeed serious. What's the situation? Take a look for yourselves. Shun Yuzhen pointed at the paper on the table. Lin Feng picked up the paper and looked at it. Shun Yuzhen looked at him curiously. He saw that Lin Feng was looking at the paper, but he couldn't see it himself. He couldn't help but look at Shun Yuzhen. What's the situation? Shun Yuzhen turned her head and said to him, there's a sudden report from a few other survivor bases saying that there are some strange creatures that have never been seen before, and they're all coming out from underground. They look strange, and they're very aggressive. When they come out, they'll turn the surrounding area into a death zone. Shun Yuzhen was taken aback when he heard this. What? Underground creatures have appeared in several survivor bases? Like those underground gorillas? Which bases are reporting this? Shun Yuzhen's expression was solemn. China, Black Dragon, and Meng. Basically, aside from Qingshan in the northwest, Hidden Cloud City and Skyfire have all sent in similar reports. Shun Yuzhen's expression changed to one of shock. When he turned to look at Lin Feng, his expression was even darker. Chapter 1180. Lin Feng looked at the information Shun Yuzhen gave him. The more he read, the darker his mood became. Some time ago, when Lin Wenwen and the others went to collect stones, a large number of strange things had appeared in the lake. Even the team that Lin Xiao had sent to collect those stones had disappeared. Now, it was the corpse hunters in Sea City who had discovered these strange creatures and sent the news back to Sea City. Coincidentally, news came from the other bases as well, saying that many strange creatures had appeared out of nowhere from underground. The information in Lin Feng's hands contained information on the appearances and characteristics of those creatures. The creatures that had appeared in Lake Tai looked like crocodiles, but not like crocodiles, like lizards, but not like lizards. The shape was about the same, but the appearance was a lot different. There was also the giant ant that had 2 stomachs in the northeast region. There's the giant spider that had 8 legs that were 2 meters long and could run very fast. There was also the giant scorpion that had 6 pincers and was found in North China. There was also the 4-meter-tall, 10-meter-long armored monster that had been found in Hidden Cloud City in the southwest. There were only a dozen of them so far, but these things liked to eat humans. They would rush over crazily when they smelled the scent of humans from a few hundred meters away. Then, after catching or trampling the human to death, they would use their claws to smash the corpse on a big rock into an indescribable mess and eat it bit by bit. The way they ate was very cruel and bloody. The scene was hair-raising. It was said that the few humans that had been seen were still in a state of mental breakdown. There was also news that an invisible creature had appeared in Skyfire City. Not only did this thing eat humans, but it also ate mutated beasts. What the hell are these things? Why are they suddenly appearing on such a large scale? Lin Feng put the information on the table in annoyance and pinched his eyebrows before asking while holding his breath. Didn't this mean that all the bases in the country had fallen into a crisis that had emerged from underground? And why is there no news from Huaxia? Did they find anything there? He looked at the information on the information and didn't find anything from Huaxia. Shun Yuzhen and Shun Yuzhen looked at each other. Shun Yuzhen shook her head. Huaxia has been very strict recently. We still need some time to get their information. Lin Feng thought for a moment and said, Does Wu Qingwen know about this? Shun Yuzhen shook her head. I'm not sure. Maybe he already knows. Lin Feng frowned. He placed his hands on the table and rested his forehead on his fingers. Although all the major bases had discovered these underground creatures, as long as they did not provoke them, they would not be a problem for the time being. However, the humans' living environment would become even more dangerous. If this continued, the probability of the corpse hunters coming back from the base would become smaller and smaller. Humans couldn't just stay in the base and not go out. His sister was missing, and he couldn't find her. The other deputy leader was injured and couldn't be treated. The danger outside the base had increased again, and his leader's eldest sister had yet to return. Lin Feng felt as if there was a huge mountain pressing down on him, making it hard for him to breathe. Fortunately, there was nothing else going on in the base, and the survivors were living peacefully. The secret of the zombie army and the plantation base was not discovered by anyone. Those things are the same as the underground gorillas outside our base. They are omnivorous creatures, and most of them are carnivorous. And all of these things have the same situation, Shen Yuzhen said solemnly. Lin Feng raised his head and asked her, "What else?" Shen Yuzhen said, "Look at the last paragraph on the second page. When these things come out, they carry a lot of different gases, but these gases are a disaster for the things on the ground. It's the death zone I mentioned just now." Lin Feng flipped to the last page and carefully read the last paragraph. Death zone. His expression became serious again. Not only terrible monsters came out, but there were also gases that destroyed the environment. Was the Earth going to be destroyed? In 100 or 200 years, would there be no plants on the planet, and the Earth would become barren? Wouldn't it become a dead planet? Maybe 100 or 200 years was too far in the future, but there was no way to stop the frequent appearance of these creatures. He didn't know what caused all these creatures to run to the surface. These creatures are appearing too frequently now. I'm afraid this situation hasn't stopped, and it may continue to appear in the future. Also, there are a lot of people who have died in the mouths of these creatures, and these things like living humans. What if they bring the gas that can kill all the mutated plants and vegetation around the survivor base? That would be even more dangerous than a zombie wave. Shen Yuzhen crossed her arms in front of her chest, looked at Lin Feng, and then looked at Chun Yuding. This possibility was something that all the major bases would think of, so the leaders of the bases might have to hold another meeting. For the future of humanity, to protect the living conditions of humanity. At this time, Wu Qingyue was also listening to Xiao Liqing's news. He sat on a sofa with his legs crossed, holding the information that Xiao Liqing was talking about. Tung Tung was sitting next to him with a gloomy face, hugging a milk bottle, and Wu Yueling, who was hugging a big rabbit, would stare at him from time to time. The big rabbit grew fur again, and its body size was a lot bigger. Its whole body was furry, and it was a lot heavier. The gray fur was drooping, and its 2 long ears were curled into a big ball on her legs, covering her entire calves. It seems that other than the underground changes here, there are changes all over the country. I don't know if there are changes in other areas. Wu Chengyue looked at the appearance of the monsters in his hands expressionlessly, and when he saw the spider and the scorpion, his eyebrows twitched. Xiao Liqing stared at his twitching eyebrows and wanted to laugh in his heart, but he pretended not to see it. Then he said quietly, "Fortunately, there are no giant centipede spirits." Wu Qingyue's face suddenly darkened, and he looked up at him. Then his handsome face smiled, and his eyes narrowed into a line. "Yes, there are no centipedes, but there are spiders." Xiao Liqing's face fell, and he said, "Cough, that's true, a 2-meter-long spider with a single leg. It's scary just thinking about it." Wu Qingyue rolled his eyes, and the smile on his face disappeared. Then he said with a serious expression, "I guess in a few days, China will send an invitation to the meeting." This was related to the living conditions of humanity. Even if China didn't want to take care of it, other small bases would probably ask him to take care of it. Chapter 1181. When Lin Xiao returned to the base, she had a gloomy aura around her. She looked at everyone with a straight face. She went to the medical center first and asked Shen Yuzhen to lead her to Lin Wenwen's room. Everyone stood outside the door and looked at her quietly. When she was still dozens of kilometers away from the base, she received news from the base. Lin Wenwen's disappearance, Yuan Tianqing's coma, and a Zhuangxiang bringing his family to the rat's nest to look for food during the day and refusing to come back. These news were not good news for her. She already had a bad feeling when she encountered a lot of abnormal creatures outside. She didn't expect that there would be more trouble waiting for her when she came back. There was a faint smell of Lin 11 in the room, as well as the smell of Lin Hao and Xiao Lily. When she saw Shun Yuzhen at the entrance of the base, she asked about the time and situation of Lin 11's disappearance. It turned out that she disappeared less than 2 days after she left. It had been 7 or 8 days since then, but Lin Feng and Yuan Tianxing hadn't found any clues about her disappearance in the base. According to Lin Hao's last words, it was the situation he hoped for. He hoped that Lin Wenwen entered her own space when her ability was upgraded. After a period of time, when her ability was completely upgraded, she might come out. After Lin Xiao entered this room, she didn't find any clues. But the smell that Lin Wenwen left behind gave her a premonition. This premonition wasn't dangerous, but it wasn't safe either. But Lin Xiao was a little relieved. At least it wasn't dangerous. Maybe Lin Wenwen herself had some kind of unusual good fortune, or maybe it was like what Lin Hao said, she had entered her own space. But at least Lin Xiao could be sure that Lin Wenwen's life shouldn't be in danger. After she walked out of the room, her expression relaxed slightly. Everyone stared at her intently, wanting to ask if she had discovered anything. Looking at her expression, she must have found something. How is it? Did you see anything? Lin Hao was the first to ask. Lin Xiao shook her head. I didn't see anything, just an intuition. Her life shouldn't be in danger, so we can rest assured. Maybe it really is like what you said. She is in her own space now. Maybe she is in some kind of abnormal state and can come out when she wakes up. Lin Hao heaved a sigh of relief when he heard what she said, but he didn't completely relax. In any case, as long as he didn't see Lin Wenwen return in person, he would not be completely at ease. Lin Xiao clapped his hands and said to the worried crowd, "Don't worry, no one else has been in this room, so I don't think she was taken away by someone." Then, Lin Xiao went to Yuan Tianxing's place. When she saw Yuan Tianxing's appearance, she frowned as if she had a headache. She closed her eyes and sighed. Then, she opened her eyes and said, "When I heard what you guys said, I guessed it must be like this." But seeing her sigh and frown, those who knew her had a bad feeling. Lin Hao stared at her and asked, "What about his situation? You should have a way, right?" Lin Xiao didn't answer him immediately. Instead, he put his hand into the bucket. Then, she controlled the energy in the water to enter Yuan Tianxing's body. Then, she narrowed her eyes and stared at the energy in his body. When she narrowed her eyes, she saw that half of Yuan Tianxing's shoulder and chest were filled with a kind of black energy that flashed with red stars. When the green energy in the lake surrounded this energy, it couldn't dispel it, nor could it dissolve it or devour it. The green energy in the lake only had one function, which was to suppress the black flashing energy from expanding, because the black flashing energy was very active and very fierce. After she pulled her hand out, she said to Lin Hao, "Fortunately, you used this lake water to soak him, otherwise it wouldn't even take 2 days. Otherwise, his whole body would have become this color." Lin Hao asked her anxiously, "How is it? Can you get rid of this energy in his body?" Lin Xiao shook her head. "It's useless. The energy in the lake can only suppress this kind of energy. Although I can increase the pressure and let Yuan Tianxing wake up, it won't be good for him to wake up." However, it wasn't a good thing for him to wake up, because even if he woke up, he would still have to bear the pain of his injuries. It's better to keep him unconscious. After she finished speaking, the faces of the others in the room darkened. Even their leader couldn't do anything, so what else could they do? The energy in Yuan Tianxing's body was like a kind of poison that couldn't be detoxified. Lin Hao looked at Lin Xiao in surprise. "How is that possible? Even you can't do anything." Then Deputy Leader Yuan, was this the only thing he could do in the future? Lin Xiao explained to him, "The energy in his body is a mutation of some substance underground that was infected by a virus. It's different from all the substances on the ground, but it has some similarities with the energy of the virus. So the lake in my space can only suppress it temporarily, but can't directly dissolve it. If we want to find something that can dissolve this energy, we'll probably have to look underground. But the main thing is, I still don't know what it is." As she spoke, she stood next to Yuan Tianxing's big bucket, one hand on her chest and the other on her chin. Yuan Tianqing sat in the bucket with his upper body bare. The water in the bucket went over his neck and reached his chin. There was another side of his neck that was the same purple as his shoulder. Standing next to him, one could see his strong and beautiful chest muscles and faintly discernible abdominal muscles. His handsome face was pale. His eyes were tightly shut, but his brows unconsciously furrowed. Even though he had lost consciousness, he could still feel the pain. Everyone thought that when Lin Xiao came back, Yuan Tianqing's situation would turn for the better. In the end, he did not expect it to be like this. There was no change at all. His original expectations had turned into disappointment and even despair. Everyone revealed a disappointed expression and sighed one after another. Lin Xiao turned to look at Yuan Tianqing's perfect side profile. Why did Lin Wenwen have to go missing at this time? If that girl had foreseen Yuan Tianqing's danger in advance, she might not have let him go down to investigate. In the end, right after Lin Wenwen disappeared, something happened to Yuan Tianqing. If Lin Wenwen hadn't disappeared, wouldn't he be worried to death? Now, Lin Xiao only hoped that Yuan Tianqing could hold on until Lin Wenwen came back. Maybe Lin Wenwen would see something crucial when he saw Yuan Tianqing like this. That could be important information to save Yuan Tianqing. However, Lin Xiao didn't know that although Lin Wenwen had gone to another time and space, he could still sense Yuan Tianqing's situation. It was just that the spirit was willing, but the strength was insufficient, and he couldn't immediately return here. Chapter 1182. Looking at her expression, Lin Feng's eyes suddenly lit up and he asked tentatively, "Do you have any other ideas?" Lin Xiao put down her hand that was scratching her chin and turned to look at him with her arms crossed. She said hesitantly, "I just think if Wenwen can come back as soon as possible, maybe she will know what we are looking for. And we have to solve more than Yuan Tianqing's problem." With that, she waved her hand and turned to walk out of Yuan Tianqing's ward. Hearing this, everyone suddenly felt that there was a bigger problem waiting for them. Only Lin Feng, Chen Yuding, and Shun Yuzhen thought of the information they had just received. As Lin Xiao walked out, she said, "Get ready for the meeting. I'll give you 10 minutes to prepare. Go to the second conference room. Oh, call Wu Qingyue over. He needs to know about this anyway." Yes. After hearing her order, Shun Yuzhen immediately turned around to inform Wu Qingyue. Meanwhile, Duan Wan went to help everyone prepare the materials for Lin Xiao's sudden meeting. 10 minutes later, in the second conference room of the first base, when everyone arrived, Lin Xiao was already standing in her exclusive seat with her arms crossed in front of her chest, thinking about something. When Wu Qingyue came over with Tungting in his arms, Tungting immediately reached out to her and cheered, "Mama, Mama!" Lin Xiao looked up at him and said, "Be quiet." Tungting immediately wilted and looked at her with pitiful eyes. If there weren't other people here, he would have scolded her for not loving him at all. But now that there were other people here, he could only call her Mama. He couldn't let too many people know that he could talk. Lin Xiao glanced at him, and seeing his expression, she couldn't help but glance at Wu Qingyue. "Are you mistreating my son?" Ever since Wu Qingyue came in, he had been staring at her with his smiling eyes. When he saw her say that, he smiled so widely that his eyes couldn't be seen, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help curling up. "How is that possible? Do you think I would mistreat your son when he is so powerful? Besides, am I the kind of person who would mistreat my own son? I have no grudge against him." Lin Xiao came over and looked Tungting up and down. "You're still denying it? Did you starve him too thin?" Wu Qingyue immediately put away his 8 fangs and said to her in a bad mood, "He grew taller, okay? What the hell? How dare he say that he starved his son thin? How infuriating." The others found their seats and sat down, leaving the last seat opposite the leader for Wu Qingyue. Lin Feng, Chen Yuding, Elmar, Xiao Lily, and Lin Kuei all came in and heard their conversation. Lin Xiao took 2 steps back and said, "Yes, that little bit can be completely ignored, okay? All right, you and Big Sister go sit at the side. Don't be noisy. If you make any more noise, I'll throw you out." The last two sentences were directed at little Tung Tung, not at all polite. Little Tung Tung looked at her as if she was a stepmother. Wui Welling obediently carried Tung Tung over and sat on the sofa in the corner. After everyone sat down, Lin Xiao sat at her seat and said, "You guys have also received news from the other bases. On my way back from the northwest, I encountered similar scenes 5 times. These creatures all came out from underground, and I can feel that the aura they bring out is completely different from the ones on the ground. These creatures are omnivorous, but when they encounter living creatures on the ground, they will choose to eat the flesh of living creatures. If not, they will also eat plants or zombies." Duan Wan printed out the information of the creatures that Lin Xiao encountered on a piece of paper and sent it to them. It detailed the characteristics and attributes of those creatures. It also included the changes in the environment after they appeared. Xin Yuzhen also added the information she got from the other bases. Everyone looked at the information in their hands while quietly listening to her explanation. And their attack and defense have one thing in common. They are very aggressive. You guys should already know that. Just like the underground gorillas, any small one of them has the strength of a normal level 2 or 3 mutated beast. There are quite a number of level 6 and 7, and of course there are level 8. The important thing is that they all move in groups, so you are lucky to meet one. But this situation is very rare, because most of the time we meet a group. Lin Xiao continued to explain to everyone. After she finished speaking, everyone's face turned ugly. However, Lin Xiao continued. Their attack is also the same. They don't have abilities and only attack with pure physical force. But there are some exceptions, and they may have some special skills. For example, I once encountered a 6-legged bear-skinned cat that jumped out of the ground. It was extremely fast. It is very fast and can instantly disappear to a distance of 1,000 meters. There's also a type that I personally think may be an earthworm that mutated into an earth dragon. They have a big mouth with a circle of teeth. But a mouthful of saliva can melt a 200 to 300 kilogram large rock. And this is their attack and also their defense, which means that no ability has any effect on them. Perhaps only a single type of superpower can cause some damage to them. In other words, the ability attacks of humans and zombies are useless against them. They can only use primitive means of attack, such as blades and hot weapons or sharp claws. But they also have skin and shells that are harder than steel. Other than these 2 points, I have something else to say. These omnivorous creatures especially like to eat humans. When they smell humans, they will even seem very excited and crazy. So I think it won't be long before all the major survival bases will be targeted. Lin Xiao's last point was obviously like a knife hanging above everyone's head, and it could be chopped down at any time. What? They will still take the initiative to attack human bases? Qiu Lily was the first to lose her composure. Her pair of red glass-like eyes stared and immediately asked. Lin Xiao said to her, "They have an abnormal desire for humans. They may not care before they eat humans, but once they eat humans, they will have a strong desire. Just like human drug addicts, after taking it once, they can't forget it and become very eager to eat humans. But they won't have a relapse like humans." After hearing what he said, Qiu Lily immediately felt a sense of horror and suddenly felt a little sympathy for other humans. As humans, they were targeted by these monsters from the underground and became their delicious food. Chapter 1183. After listening to Lin Kuei's words, Lin Xiao looked at everyone. Then he nodded and said, "That's right. Moreover, these creatures especially like to eat ordinary people without abilities. I reckon they will follow the smell to find us." "That can't be. Then what should we do? Aren't those things hard to kill?" Qiu Lily immediately asked anxiously. Lin Kuei said, "Metahuman's attacks are useless against them, but weapons like swords and guns can. But it's very difficult to kill them. Ordinary bullets can at most penetrate their skin, but they can't kill them. But it's not easy to stop them either. Their attack power is equivalent to that of high-level mutated beasts. We can't kill them, and we can't stop them either. Are they scarier than the zombies and mutated beasts we encountered before? Lin Feng placed both his elbows on the table and asked Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao looked at him, then at the expectant gazes of the others. She lowered her eyes and said, "Let's put it this way. As long as it's a metahuman, mutated beast, or even mutated plant that has mutated due to the virus, their abilities will be useless against these creatures. When they discover the human base, I'm afraid humans will face another catastrophic disaster." Everyone looked at each other. The atmosphere became tense, and finally, everyone looked at Lin Xiao in silence. "Then how are we going to avoid this disaster? Did you discover anything?" Chen Yuding looked at everyone and couldn't help but ask Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao thought for a moment and said, "Apart from the underground gorillas, we haven't discovered any other underground creatures. The closest ones to Sea City are probably those lizards at Lake Tai. Now we have to guard against those too. But we also have to pay attention to whether there are any new creatures." As she spoke, she glanced at Wu Changyue, who was across the long table. "Speaking of defense, you guys can relax. In the future, we don't have to guard against zombies. Now we have to guard against these underground creatures. Didn't you keep that level 8 monster as your pet? Why do we still need to guard against them?" Wu Qingyue placed one hand on the table to support half of his face. He tilted his head and smiled at her, then said lightly. Qiu Lily quietly leaned her head towards Lin Kuei and whispered, "Why do I feel that he seems to be a little jealous of our base?" Lin Kuei glanced at her without saying a word. Elmar spread her hands at Wu Qingyue and said, "Although we don't have to guard against the underground gorillas, the threat from the underground hasn't decreased much. If it was really as you said, Yuan Tianqing wouldn't have been injured." Lin Feng nodded. "Yes, it won't be easy on our side either. However," Wu Qingyue said, "but it's also because of Yuan Tianqing that he temporarily sealed the crisis in advance, isn't it? He really made the right judgment. What do you want to say?" Lin Xiao looked at him and narrowed his eyes. Wu Qingyue laughed and said, "So why don't you go to Haiqing to take a look at the situation? Bring your survivors to Haiqing's shelter for the time being. In any case, if something really happens here, you'll have to release your zombie army. Therefore, in order to continue to conceal the existence of the zombie army, the few thousand survivors in the base should first be moved to Haiqing. After all, Haiqing also had its own shelter. With hundreds of thousands of people in a shelter, it wouldn't be a problem to add a few thousand more people. But the shelter of the base hadn't been built yet. If the underground creatures from Lake Tai found Haiqing, the base wouldn't be far from it. Moreover, from the hardware of the base's defense, Haiqing had more people and was more powerful. Wu Qingyue's words were very beneficial to Lin Xiao as long as he didn't expose the existence of the zombie army. However, the others rolled their eyes at him. Qiu Lily pointed at him and said, "You make it sound so nice. You want to lure our leader to your house again." Wu Qingyue glanced at the crowd. He was thick-skinned, and his expression did not change. He still had a crooked face and smiled as he waved his hand and said, "Then do you think I'm right?" Qiu Lily stared at him and wanted to refute him, but she found that he was right. In the end, she could only stare at him. It was true that they couldn't let the survivors in the base know about their zombie army, but if the underground creatures appeared, the defense of the base would be too weak without the protection of the zombie army. Therefore, if they could hide in the shelter of Haiqing, their chances of survival would be higher. Lin Xiao knocked on the table and said, "Let's not talk about the shelter for now. Let's see what China is planning. After Sikong Chun understands the characteristics of these creatures, I think he should make a move. He might use this meeting as a cover and do something else in secret. How's the progress on your side?" The last question was asked to Wu Changyue. She had met Sikong Chun in the northwest, and he was in such a hurry to get the 9th level energy core. He must have some urgent plans. However, because of her appearance, the other party's plans had failed. They would definitely make other plans. There should be some clues. China's security is very tight now. If Sikong Chun didn't go out this time, my people wouldn't have the chance to get this information. Wu Qingyue didn't care much about Sikong Chen's actions. In that case, the first thing we need to do is to keep an eye on the movements of these creatures. We need to prepare to evacuate the people as soon as possible. We can't let everyone hide in the shelter now. We don't know how long it will take, and it might cause panic among the people. That might cause more problems. Lin Xiao thought about it and looked at everyone. Do you have any objections? The others shook their heads and didn't have any objections. Just as she said, they didn't know when those things would come, and they couldn't be sure when the disaster would come. They still had to make preparations, but they could only wait until they had no other choice to enter the shelter. After all, they didn't know how long they would have to survive in the shelter. They had to prepare the food and water again. However, adding resources couldn't be done in a short period of time. They still needed some time to prepare. Wu Qingyue waved his hand and said, I do. So, does this mean you agree to go to Haicheng with me? Survey the shelter's defense facilities, the environment, and so on. Lin Xiao didn't wait for him to finish. She waved her hand and said, Who said I agreed? Do I need to go for such a small matter? Let the others go. Let Lin Feng go. Leave the matters of the base to me. Chapter 1184. Lin Feng, who was suddenly called, was taken aback. He looked at Lin Xiao and then at Wu Qingyue. He shrugged and said, I'll go, but are you sure? Although what Lin Xiao said was basically an order, why was the atmosphere a little weird? I'm talking about you. I won't object if you like to stay in our base, but don't try to turn our leader to your side, okay? Elmar finally looked at Wu Qingyue and complained. Lin Xiao couldn't be bothered with Wu Qingyue and nodded to Lin Feng. I'm sure. You go. She stood up and was about to walk out. At this moment, she suddenly stopped and turned to look out of the window. That was the direction of the gate that she came from not long ago. Oh, whoa. A strange beast roar came from afar. What's that sound? The captain of the guards at the gate turned to look in that direction in confusion. A skinny figure appeared on the top of the wall. He was sitting on the platform by the wall, wearing a mask that covered the lower half of his face. He squinted his zombie-like eyes and looked in the direction of the sound. Woof, 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 woof. Woof, woof. A few familiar barks suddenly came from that direction. Everyone in the base knew about this dog barking. It was a black mutant dog that their leader had subdued. It had been running around outside the base's outer safe zone. Someone even discovered that there was a huge black snake that was thicker than a bucket with the dog. There seemed to be another one, but no one saw what it was. That sound, is it the leader's dog? The captain at the gate asked in confusion after hearing the dog barking. What was that sound just now? A guard beside him asked curiously. The captain shook his head. I don't know, I've never heard that sound before. The little man on the top of the wall put down the book in his hand, then stood up and looked into the distance. Roar woof! Another loud dog barking came from afar. This sound, although it's also a dog, it doesn't seem to be the leader's? Definitely not. This one's voice is very calm and steady. Although the leader's voice is also very loud, it doesn't sound serious at all. The leader must be a husky. Shoo, don't talk nonsense. If it's not, and it hears you, it might eat you. How is that possible? The leader's pet won't eat people. The soldiers at the gate began to discuss among themselves, trying to guess what the second barking was all about. Roar woof. Woof woof woof. Roar, roar. Little Four stood on top of the 20-meter wall, squinting his eyes to look in the direction of the beast roar. In addition to the first three pets, there were two other strange beasts, one of which had a very dangerous feeling. What is it? Just as Little Four was pondering, a figure suddenly appeared beside him. Turning his head, he saw a tall female zombie with big breasts and long legs standing next to him. Her long hair was blown by the wind from the top of the wall, and strands of it danced in the air. It can't be, right? That big cat actually followed them all the way here? Could it be that it followed us back? Lin Xiao stood beside Little Four and said in confusion. Little Four turned his head to look at her, his eyes filled with confusion and curiosity, waiting for her explanation. Lin Xiao looked at him, but reached out to touch his head and said, I'll explain it to you later. After saying that, she disappeared on the spot. After seeing her disappear, Little Four immediately shifted his gaze to the distance. Lin Xiao flashed to the place where the commotion came from and saw a smear of red jumping around in the black. Roar, 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 roar. Its whole body was blood red. It had a bald body, 6 claws, and a huge snake tail. A strange cat with 2 horns on its head was leaping between 2 large dogs and a large snake with ease. HM2. Lin Xiao squinted at the other 2 dogs, then speechlessly discovered, weren't they the nemesis of Wang? The huge Tibetan Mastiff that was covered in fur and was 2 to 3 times bigger than Wang. Why did this cat and dog follow him all the way from the northwest to this place? Speaking of which, what were they doing? Lin Xiao's nose twitched, then her eyes lit up. She had noticed that the huge Tibetan Mastiff before, although it looked very fierce and scary, it actually didn't have the smell of blood on it. But the 6-legged strange cat didn't have any smell of blood on it either. It was a bit different from the underground creatures she had encountered before. The situation in front of her was that 2 dogs and a huge black snake were surrounding the 6-legged strange cat. The strange cat, which was bigger than all of them, dodged left and right, skillfully dodging their attacks. Why did it look like it was playing? What's going on? No way, you got a new pet? Wu Qingyue's figure flashed next to her, and he asked in surprise after seeing the situation. Just now, the female zombie suddenly disappeared from the conference hall and rushed towards the direction of the commotion outside the base. Everyone was stunned. Then they suddenly felt a dangerous and unfamiliar aura coming from here. Lin Xiao glanced at him and said, "Which eye of yours saw that I got a pet?" Wu Qingyue shrugged. "Didn't you already have it as Zhuang, anyway? It's normal to take in 2 more. How?" At this moment, a low dog's bark suddenly rang out, followed by the sound of something tearing through the air. Both Lin Xiao and Zhang Wuji turned their heads at the same time. A big black dog that was about the size of an ordinary water buffalo and covered in fur fell toward them. This big guy can't even take a beating. I didn't expect Wang to be so afraid of it. Lin Xiao's body flashed, and he and Wu Qingyue simultaneously flashed away from their original spot. Bang! The huge black dog's body smashed into the small building they were standing on just now, causing the entire roof to collapse. How? A red shadow flashed and pounced towards them. With a tap of his feet, Lin Xiao flashed to the other side. However, the red shadow was clearly faster than her. As if it had predicted her movements, it flashed in front of her. Lin Xiao was slightly stunned. He suddenly somersaulted in the air and avoided the direction of the big red cat. He flew to the other side and calmly landed on a tree. No killing intent? She didn't feel any killing intent from the strange cat, and she didn't even feel threatened. So, why did the strange cat follow them here? Chapter 1185. You didn't subdue it? Is this the underground creature you were talking about? Wu Qingyue landed not far from Lin Xiao with a smile. Then, he turned his head and stared at the huge 6-legged cat. Its aura is at least level 7, but it feels a little more dangerous than a level 7 mutated beast. It's really similar to those underground gorillas. Wu giggled, seeing that it couldn't stop Lin Xiao. The strange cat let out a strange cry and rushed towards Lin Xiao. "Does it like you?" Wu Qingyue said to Lin Xiao with a smile. Lin Xiao ignored him and said, "Who knows?" Then, she jumped into the air and disappeared. The 6-legged cat landed where Lin Xiao disappeared and looked blankly at the sky where Lin Xiao disappeared. Then, it circled around twice and then another 2 times before stopping. It swung its 20-meter-long snake tail, and its 2 round ears kept shaking. At this time, Dahe, Wang, and Big Mushroom were quietly watching from a distance, staring at the strange cat. However, they didn't intend to rush over. The big black Tibetan Mastiff that had smashed on a roof fell to the ground and shook its fluffy black hair. Then, it raised its head and looked at the strange red cat, then bared its teeth and growled at it. The red strange cat stared at the sky for a while and found that Lin Xiao had really disappeared. It lowered its head and turned to look at the huge Tibetan Mastiff. Its 2 big round eyes blinked, and it suddenly grinned, baring its teeth and growling at it. Woo woo. After being growled by the strange cat, the Tibetan Mastiff became even more excited. It seemed that it wasn't afraid of the cat's aura, which might be more powerful than itself. Seeing that the Mastiff was not afraid of it at all, the strange cat became fiercer. It suddenly stopped baring its teeth and snorted at the Tibetan Mastiff disdainfully. Then it turned around and faced the Mastiff with its back. Then it bent its 6 legs slightly and jumped into the air. Finally, it disappeared in the air. After it disappeared, Lin Xiao appeared on the roof of a building. Woof! After the strange cat disappeared, Lin Xiao came out again. Er Wang and Dahe flashed and immediately appeared on the roof beside Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao looked at the direction in which the strange cat had left and then at the Tibetan Mastiff, who had regained its composure. Just a moment ago, he was still fiercely baring his white teeth, but now he had regained his calm appearance. Just as Lin Xiao was looking at the Tibetan Mastiff, the Mastiff suddenly turned its head to look at her. Then it also turned around and leaped away. Whether it was the 6-legged hairless monster cat or the mutant Tibetan Mastiff, neither of them were heading towards the base. Instead, they were heading out of the base. Lin Xiao thought for a moment. She wasn't worried about the Tibetan Mastiff, but she had to go and check on the 6-legged cat. Thinking of this, she disappeared in a flash and chased after the strange cat while invisible. After she disappeared, a few figures appeared beside Wu Changyue. Qiu Lily sniffed and frowned. What's that smell? Is it the smell of that monster? Lin Feng looked around and found that the damage around them was not very serious. There was even no energy fluctuation. He didn't know what those mutant beasts were doing here to make such a big noise. It seemed that they had only roared a few times. Lin Kuei sniffed and said, I've encountered this smell before. Is it that red cat? Qiu Lily's eyes immediately lit up when she heard that it was a cat. She didn't care about the smell that she had just disliked. She looked at him and asked, Cat? What cat? What does it look like? Lin Kuei thought for a moment and said, It's as big as a buffalo and has 6 claws. It also has 2 horns on its head and no hair on its body. It's smooth and red. And it has a long tail that looks like a snake. Hearing this, Qiu Lily's enthusiasm was immediately extinguished. No hair, and 6 legs, and a snake tail? Imagining it, it looked really weird when they were put together. Where did you meet it before? Lin Feng suddenly thought of a question and asked. We met it before we left the northwest area. I didn't expect it to appear here so soon. It might have followed us here, Lin Kuei replied, his expression becoming somewhat serious. So why did this monster follow them here? Everyone had the same question in their minds. Lin Xiao rose into the air and controlled her energy to chase after the strange cat. She thought that would be very far, but not long after, she followed the strange cat and stopped at the edge of the wetland forest near the West Lake. Although it had a huge body and 6 legs, it was very light when it walked. It didn't even make any sound when it walked. Its aura was so strong that the surrounding mutant beasts all ran away. Lin Xiao landed on a tree and observed its movements in confusion. She saw that the strange cat seemed to be looking for something in the forest. After a while, she saw it stop slightly. In front of it was a mutant plant. It was a level 5 mutant tree with many red fruits hanging on its branches. The strange cat looked up at the fruits, then looked left and right. Then it suddenly swung its tail upwards. Pa, pa, pa. The fruits on the branches were swung down by its tail like a giant whip. Then Lin Xiao saw the strange cat walk over and lower its head to look for something in the grass. A thought flashed through Lin Xiao's mind as she stared at the strange cat's figure in disbelief. Very quickly, the strange cat picked up a fruit from the bushes and swallowed it. Lin Xiao's expression immediately became strange. This big cat is a vegetarian? No way. Other people eat meat. Why are you a vegetarian? What's more, the cats on the ground ate meat. Why do you only look like a cat? After the 6-legged strange cat swallowed a fruit, it stuck out its tongue and licked around its nose. Then it slowly swung its tail left and right, then lowered its head to pick up fruits from the grass to eat. Lin Xiao quietly watched as it ate all the fruits it had just picked up and began to hit the fruits with its tail again. Only then did she turn around and leave. No wonder she couldn't smell blood from it. This big guy was really a vegetarian. But why did it appear outside the base just now? And when she appeared, it seemed to be very excited. When Lin Xiao returned to the outskirts of the base, Er Wang and the others had already run to the mountain near the Wushan plantation base. After returning home, Lin Xiao looked at the two little ones sitting in the living room, but there was no trace of Wu Changyue. She asked curiously, "Lingling, where's your dad?" Wu Yiwilling raised her head and shook her head, indicating that she didn't know either. Lin Xiao raised his head and looked around in confusion. Chapter 1186. Lin Xiao looked around suspiciously. He had clearly sensed Wu Qingyue's aura just now. Why did she disappear the moment she came in? But in the next second, she abruptly turned her head back. Her vision darkened, and then she felt warmth on her lips. Then, an arm suddenly wrapped around her waist, and she was carried into someone's embrace. However, just as his lips felt warm, Lin Xiao reflexively grabbed his entire face and quickly pressed it back. She turned her head and said, "Can't you be more careful in front of children? How could this man be so thick-skinned? He actually did this kind of thing to her in front of a child. Besides, did she agree to it?" The two kids, sitting on the sofa, looked at her calmly. Then Tung Tung said, "We didn't see anything." Then he glanced at Wu Yiwilling. Wu Yiwilling narrowed her eyes at him. Then he lowered his head and continued drawing. Wu Qingyue put his arm around Lin Xiao's waist and smiled at her. "See, just pretend that they don't exist." Lin Xiao. Tung Tung pointed at Wu Qingyue and said, "It's not good to pretend that we don't exist. If we really don't exist, Papa, you will definitely push Mama down directly." Lin Xiao pushed away Wu Qingyue, who suddenly stuck to him, and said to his son speechlessly, "Little Tungting, what nonsense are you talking about? Kids shouldn't talk nonsense." After being pushed away by her, Wu Qingyue did not continue to pester her. Letting go of her, he walked to the sofa and sat down. Then he looked up and asked her, "Why don't you go to High City with me? If I go back, I'll probably be busy for a while. I don't have time to come here." Lin Xiao glanced at him lightly and said, "I don't think I need to go for such a small matter like scouting the fallout shelter. Moreover, I had to think of a way to solve Yuan Tianqing's situation. Lin Feng should go to Sea City first. Besides, I'm very busy, okay? You're the only one who is busy." She was the leader, okay? He also had a lot of things to do in the base. Also, the strength of the zombie army needs to be upgraded and the size of the army needs to be expanded. After saying that, she went into her room, took out a set of home clothes, and went into the bathroom to take a shower. She didn't even have time to take a bath these past few days. "I haven't showered for a few days." Wu Qingyue sat beside little Tung Tung, and then heard little Tung Tung say to him, "It's only been 10 days since we last met, and you already miss her so much." Wu Qingyue, who was openly teased by his son, looked at him with a smile and said, "That's right, I miss her. After all, we haven't seen each other for more than 10 days. When he didn't see her, he didn't have such a realistic feeling, but after she came back and saw her, he couldn't take his eyes off her. When he got close to her and smelled the fragrance on her body, his mind would always be somewhat in turmoil." Tung Tung didn't expect him to answer so straightforwardly. He looked at him speechlessly. "Papa, you're so shameless." Wu Yiwilling, who was at the side, quietly came over and sat beside Tingting. She looked at Wu Changyue silently. He used his actions to show that he agreed with little Tungting's words. Then, he looked at Wu Changyue with disdain. Papa was so thick-skinned. Wu Changyue looked at Tungting speechlessly. "I can't help it. I like your mother now. When I see her, I can't help but want to get close to her and hug her. Daddy, you're not ashamed." At this time, a strange girl's voice sounded softly. Wu Qingyue and Tungting were stunned at the same time. Then, they looked around and suddenly fixed their eyes on Wu Yiwilling at the same time. "Ah, Lingling." Tungting opened his eyes wide and looked at Wu Yiwilling in surprise. The The smile on Wu Qingyue's face disappeared, and he looked shocked. He stared at Wu Yueling blankly, and his expression became uncertain. Doubt, disbelief, uncertainty, and so on converged. He instantly came in front of Wu Yueling and looked at her with a rare expression of excitement. He said, "Lingling, did you just speak?" Wu Yueling looked at him, then narrowed her eyes and smiled. "Ah, Lingling, say it again. You really spoke just now, didn't you?" Tungting also climbed onto Wu Yueling's leg and said to her expectantly. However, Wu Yueling just shook her head at him and continued to smile. "Lingling, can you speak?" Wu Qingyue also looked at Wu Yueling expectantly, but Wu Yueling just shook her head. Tungting said to her, "You were the one who spoke just now, right? I heard it clearly." When Lin Xiao came out of the shower, she happened to see the three of them in a pile. Wu Qingyue and Tungting seemed to be very excited. "What's wrong?" Tungting turned half of his body and said to her, "Lingling said something just now. Although she was complaining about Papa, she really spoke." Hearing this, Lin Xiao immediately looked at Wu Yueling happily. She asked, "Oh, can Lingling speak again? Can she still speak now?" As she spoke, she walked over and stood beside her, bending over to look at her. Wu Yueling had just shook her head at Tungting and Wu Qingyue, but now she nodded to Lin Xiao and answered, "Yes." Tungting immediately said to Wu Yueling jealously, "Ah, Lingling, you are biased. You nod when Mama asks you, but you ignore us." Wu Yueling just smiled at his dissatisfied accusation. Lin Xiao reached out and took him off Wu Yueling's short legs, then put him on the sofa on the other side. She said, "All right, don't sit on my lap." Then she sat next to Wu Yueling and said to her, "Come on, say something again for me. What did you just say?" Wu Yueling looked at Wu Qingyue, then narrowed her eyes and smiled. She said in a low voice, "Daddy is not ashamed." After that, she glanced at Wu Qingyue, then turned to look at Lin Xiao. Then she lowered her head and refused to look up at Lin Xiao and Wu Qingyue's faces. However, the other three showed happy expressions, and Wu Qingyue's smile was not as fake as usual. At this time, his eyes were full of joy, and the aura all over his body also revealed a kind of happy mood. Lin Xiao looked at her and also smiled. She said to her, "Lingling is so great. In this way, we can communicate well with each other in the future." Wu Qingyue touched Wu Yueling's head with his hand, then stood up and walked towards the kitchen. It was time to cook again. Tungting sniffed Lin Xiao's body and suddenly said, "Even if you took a shower, there are still a lot of strange smells on your body. Mama, what did you encounter on this trip?" Lin Xiao said to him, "Oh, recently, there have been creatures coming out of the ground everywhere. They are very strange, and they like to eat people like zombies." Tungting was slightly stunned, then his little face slightly wrinkled. No one knew what he was thinking. Seeing his expression, Lin Xiao asked curiously, "What's wrong?" Tungting's expression immediately recovered when she asked him. He looked up at Lin Xiao and said, "Well, I have been feeling strange recently. So, it is because of the appearance of these things?" Lin Xiao looked down at him in surprise. "Hey, can you feel it?" Chapter 1187. Tung crossed his arms in front of his chest, then lowered his head and said in a low voice, "Yes, I have a feeling, but I don't know what's going on." Lin Xiao looked at him and said, "Your premonition is quite strong. If only you had Wenwen's ability to predict things. The things outside are quite troublesome. There are too many of them. I don't know how to effectively defend and deal with them." Tung said, "I don't know where Aunt Wenwen went, but I'm not worried at all. Anyway, I just have a hunch that she will come back safely." Therefore, he had been very calm and was not anxious at all. Lin Xiao sighed and said, "I hope she can come back soon, or Yuan Tianqing's injury will not recover." Tungting glanced at her and suddenly reached out to pat her arm. He comforted her and said, "Don't worry, Mama. Uncle Yuan will be fine." At this moment, Lin Xiao suddenly smelled Duan Wan's scent outside the door. Soon, someone knocked on the door. Lin Xiao shouted at the door, "Come in." Duan immediately opened the door and rushed in. She said to her anxiously, "Leader, something happened to Deputy Leader Yuan." Lin Xiao adjusted her expression and stood up. She put Ting Tong on the sofa and said, "I'll go out for a while." Then she immediately turned around and left the house with Duan Wan. After Wu Qingyue came out, he looked at the empty living room speechlessly and asked the two little ones, "She left again?" The two little ones turned their heads and nodded at him. Wu Qingyue said helplessly, "She just came back to take a shower, but she went out again." On the other side, Lin Xiao and Duan Wan quickly arrived at Yuan Tianqing's ward. They saw Lin Hao standing in the room with a frown. They knew that the situation was bad at first glance. "What's wrong?" Lin Xiao asked as she walked in. At the same time, she looked at Yuan Tianqing, who was still soaking in the bucket. Then she saw a patch of purple. Lin Xiao's expression darkened. The purple on Yuan Tianqing's body had spread to his entire chest, and even his other shoulder had turned purple. The other two arms were also covered in an ominous purple color. Apart from Yuan Tianqing's face, everything below his neck and even his body in the water had turned purple. Lin Xiao squinted his eyes to see through the energy situation in his body. He saw that the black energy with flashing red stars was covering his entire body. The green energy in the water had completely disappeared. Even the green energy that Lin Xiao had controlled to enter Yuan Tianqing's body to suppress the black energy had disappeared. Why did it suddenly start to spread? It was clearly fine a few hours ago. Why did the energy suddenly go berserk? Lin Xiao frowned as he stared at Yuan Tianqing's body. Then he suddenly reached out to drag Yuan Tianqing out of the bucket and place him on the bed, dripping wet. Then he poured 3 cups of lake water into his mouth and quickly emptied the bucket of water into the new lake water. Finally, he picked Yuan Tianqing up and threw him into the bucket. Then he reached into the water and controlled the energy in the water to enter Yuan Tianqing's body. While controlling the energy in the water, she asked Lin Hao, "How did it suddenly become like this? What did you do before?" Lin Hao shook his head and said, "No, I didn't do anything. Suddenly, I became like this." The green energy in the water once again entered Yuan Tianqing's body through his pores and began to suppress the black energy, slowly calming it down. Lin Hao looked at her actions, thought for a moment, and said, "Maybe it's because the energy in the water has been used up." Lin Xiao looked at him doubtfully, "But you were fine when you soaked him like this for a few days." Lin Hao waved his hand at her. "No, there was no one in the water controlling the energy, and the energy was not stimulated before. Maybe after you came back, you controlled the energy in the water into his body, and as a result, the activity of the energy was stimulated." Lin Xiao said speechlessly, "In the end, I did the opposite of what I wanted." Lin Hao shook his head again. "Not really. If you didn't control the energy in the lake and continued to suppress the energy, it probably wouldn't take long for him to become like this. As long as you don't completely expel the abnormal energy, it will also spread." Lin Xiao sighed and said, "Even my lake water can't do anything about it. The situation now is really tricky. Be it Yuan Tianqing's current situation or the other creatures that appeared." Looking at Yuan Tianqing, Lin Xiao suddenly said, "If Wenwen comes back and sees him like this, she will probably be anxious to death." At this time, after Lin Wenwen returned to the Dong family's mansion that night, she felt uneasy for a few days. That feeling gradually calmed down. There were no longer any images in her mind. Then, she still worked hard every day to lose weight. After more than a week of perseverance, Dong Xinxin's body was finally not so weak. Moreover, his body movements were getting more and more relaxed. However, his body shape was still the same as before, and he had only lost a few kilograms of weight. However, the time Dong Xinxin was awake was getting longer, and the time he slept was also getting shorter and shorter. Still working out? Dong Lijia opened the door and poked her head in, looking at Lin Wenwen, who was still on the treadmill. Lin Wenwen used Dong Xinxin's fat body to run on the treadmill. She was sweating profusely, and the hair on the side of her forehead was soaked with sweat. Her face was also very red, and she was breathing heavily through her nose, but her teeth were clenched tightly. Her feet were jogging rhythmically, and it seemed that she had been running for a long time. Dong Lijiao walked over, stood beside her, looked at her, and said, "You are really working hard to help Xin lose weight." In the past few days, he had been chasing Lin Wenwen to prove that she was not a man, but no matter how Lin Wenwen tried to prove it, he did not believe it. Lin Wenwen was so angry that every time she came back, she would beat him up to calm down. Hearing Dong Lijiao's words, Lin Wenwen just looked at him while panting, and then continued to run. Although she wanted to say that she had no choice if she did not help Dong Xin improve his physical strength and provide energy for her current spiritual consciousness, she would not be able to give this body to him. "Oh, by the way, you ordered so much gasoline. Can your space hold it?" Dong Lijia said to her at this time. If ordinary people wanted to buy a large amount of gasoline, it would be very troublesome, but fortunately, she had the identity of Dong Xin. Moreover, Dong Lijia knew a child of the city's oil company, so he helped her find that child to help her get more than 300 barrels of gasoline from his company. Moreover, it would take more than a month for it to be delivered. Hearing Dong Lijia's words, Lin Wenwen turned off the treadmill and slowly walked down. She took a towel to wipe her sweat and said, "If it can't hold it, why would I buy so much?" Chapter 1188. Dong Lijia was also wearing sportswear. Apparently, he was also here to work out. He stood next to Lin Wenwen and asked, "Is the chance of awakening a superpower after the apocalypse very high?" Lin Wenwen looked at him and said, "Not high, but not small. In the early stages, there's a 5% chance. In the later stages, it depends on luck, but there's also a 1% chance." Dong Lijia didn't understand and asked, "In the later stages?" Lin Wenwen nodded and said, "In the later stages, people will awaken one after another. Your sister awakened in the later stages." Dong Lijia thoughtfully thought for a moment and asked, "Does that mean if I can continue to live, there is still a chance for me to awaken my superpower?" Lin Wenwen looked at him. According to Dong Xin, Dong Lijia died in the end. Her relatives were lucky enough not to become zombies when the apocalypse came. But in the end, they all died in the hands of others and in the mouths of zombies in order to save her. In the early stages of the apocalypse, people could still rely on firearms and ammunition to protect themselves, but in the later stages, these weapons became somewhat useless. Although they could still be used to deal with ordinary level 1 zombies, there would be more and more high-level zombies after the apocalypse. Listening to Lin Wenwen's suggestion, Dong Lijia also bought a lot of weapons. These days, Mr. Dong finally believed Lin Wenwen and Dong Lijia's words and began to sell the company's stocks. Everyone in the company thought he was crazy. Mr. Dong also began to hire more bodyguards. In addition to the bodyguards he already had, he also hired some people from security companies. He also began to buy a lot of materials and even found some skilled auto mechanics to secretly modify the car. Anyway, it was not difficult to spend all the money in 2 months. The difficult part was that the preparation time was getting shorter and shorter. Lin Wenwen picked up the cup next to her and took a sip, then said to him, "Well, there are many people who awakened in the later stages. It's just that at that time, we didn't know the conditions for awakening, so we didn't research it. At that time, all the major bases were only focused on researching zombies." Dong Lijia did some stretching exercises in the open space of the gym. After preparing for a while, he walked to the door and opened it. "You guys come in." Lin Wenwen turned her head and saw 4 men of different sizes and heights. Their auras were restrained and faintly revealed a hint of murderous intent. Walked in. She turned her head to look at Dong Lijia in surprise, and then looked at the 4 men. He could immediately tell from his aura that they had all killed before. He didn't know if they were retired Special Forces soldiers or mercenaries. Dong Lijia said to Lin Wenwen, "They're the coaches that my dad hired through his connections. Although the time is short, we still have to prepare in advance." Lin Wenwen knew that the preparation he was talking about was to learn some self-defense skills in a short period of time. After all, in the chaotic and unsafe post-apocalyptic world, Having some self-defense skills would increase one's chances of survival. Then, Dong Lijia introduced Lin Wenwen to the four of them. This is my sister, Dong Xin. You don't have to worry about her. Just focus on teaching me. Three of the four were expressionless. Only one of the shorter and thinner young men had a faint smile on his face. The four nodded at Lin Wenwen at the same time. Lin Wenwen also nodded in response, then glanced at the smiling man, somehow feeling that his smile was a little familiar. But she was sure that she didn't know this person. Lin Wenwen asked curiously, "What do you want them to teach you?" Dong Lijia pointed to the two on the left. These two will teach fighting, and these two will teach marksmanship. Lin Wenwen looked at the four coaches who had a strong aura, then nodded and retreated to the door. "Since you guys want to train here, then I'll go run in the woods outside." After saying that, she took her water bottle and walked out of the gym. She knew from the way these men looked at her just now that it was their private training time. They didn't want their skills to be seen by others. They felt that even if this fat girl saw it, she might not be able to understand it, let alone learn it. But some people just didn't want unrelated people to be present when they were teaching others. Lin Wenwen took the towel and water bottle out of the gym, went down the living room, and walked out from the back door. Then, one of the two bodyguards at the back door automatically came out and took the water bottle and towel from her. When Lin Wenwen rested in the pavilion in the woods after a few laps, the silent bodyguard had already prepared a new towel and changed the water bottle to warm water. In the beginning, they still used a tray, as if they were waiters. But Lin Wenwen felt uncomfortable, so she told them not to use the tray. She could just put on the stone table in the pavilion. After 2 weeks of persistent training, Lin Wenwen could now jog for an hour and a half. Every day, she gritted her teeth and tried her best to last a little longer. She would only rest when she was dizzy. In the first few days, she even ran until she vomited. It was extremely uncomfortable. Her head was dizzy, her body was sweating, her hands and feet were weak, and her stomach was churning. This was the side effect of suddenly doing a lot of exercise after not moving for a long time. But after a few days, she slowly felt better. Lin Wenwen would also practice fighting when she had nothing to do. Although this body wasn't hers, the skills were still hers. The experience and memory of practicing reflexes were also hers. It would be a waste if she didn't practice. While the brother and sister were trying their best to lose weight, several sports cars arrived at the gate of the Dong family's mansion. Luo Yuanjun was sitting in the passenger seat of Deng Qinfei's car. He looked at the gate and said, "Hey, why did Dong Jieja turn over a new leaf recently? Why are you just staying at home and not going anywhere?" Deng Qinfei drove the car to the gate with a straight face and showed his face to the guard. The guard was familiar with Deng Qinfei and Luo Yuanjun, so he immediately opened the electronic gate and let them in. Deng Qinfei turned to the guard and asked, "Is your young master at home?" The guard nodded. "Yes." After making sure that Dong Jieja was at home, Deng Qinfei drove the car directly in. In addition to Deng Qinfei and Luo Yuanjun in the first car, there were several young men and women in the 3 cars behind them. "Do you think he'll look down on us if we don't greet him?" In the 2 cars behind, Qin Jiao looked left and right as she drove. Lin Yuehui smiled calmly and said, "What's there to dislike? Even if he does dislike him, he should dislike his 2 brothers. Okay?" They were the ones who said that they would come to see Dong Lijia. Qin Jiao said hesitantly, "Maybe Dong Lijia is busy at home. If we come here, we will disturb him." Lin Yuehui rolled his eyes at her and said, "Why do you think so much? We are already here." Qin Jiao thought about it and agreed, so she was in a good mood again. Chapter 1189. For supercars drove into the yard of the Dong family's house and then stopped in front of the house. The strong old butler stood at the door and welcomed them into the living room. He invited them to sit down and said, "Young master is in the gym. I'll call him down. Please wait a moment." Deng Qinfei nodded to him politely. Luo Yuanjun asked curiously, "He's working out at this time? What has Dong Jieja been doing recently?" The others were also puzzled when they heard the old butler say that Dong Lijia was in the gym. The old butler just smiled and shook his head, saying, "I don't know what young master is thinking. Why don't you ask him yourself later?" After that, he turned around and went upstairs. He asked servants to serve coffee and tea to the young masters and ladies. Dong Lijia was being tortured by several coaches in the gym when someone knocked on the door. The smiling coach was standing by the door. He turned around and opened the door. Seeing the old butler, he let him in. "Young master, Chen Fei, several young masters and Miss Qin are here to see you." At this time, Dong Lijia, who was lying on the ground without any image, got up and wiped the sweat on his face with a towel. He gasped and said doubtfully, "What are they doing here? Why didn't they tell us in advance?" The old butler smiled and said, "They are waiting in the living room now." Dong Lijia nodded. "I see. Tell them I'll take a shower and go down." "Well, that's all for today." He said the last sentence to the coaches. The coaches nodded to him and found their own shirts to put on. Even though there was air conditioning here, they still sweated a lot after strenuous exercise. Anyway, they were all men, so they simply took off their shirts. In fact, Dong Lijia had been working out and had learned one or two kinds of martial arts, but he seldom practiced them. After all, he used to learn martial arts just to avoid being kidnapped or to exercise, so he didn't pay much attention to it. So now, he had learned some martial arts. But if he really encountered an actual combat, he would have to rely on his reflexes. He asked these 4 coaches to come just to make a last-minute effort. But no matter what, an additional skill was an additional layer of protection, and it was a guarantee of life. Lin Wenwen ran a few laps and returned to the pavilion. He asked the 2 bodyguards. A car just came in. "Who was it?" One of them replied, "They are young master's friends, as well as Miss Qin and Miss Lin." When Lin Wenwen heard the last 2 words, a sense of annoyance flashed across his heart. Pursing his lips, he didn't say anything. After wiping his sweat, he drank some water and rested for a while. Then, he said to one of them, "Go see if the gym is empty. I'll use it when it's free." Yes, since those people were here, Dong Lijia definitely wouldn't continue practicing. She hoped that the 2 women would be tactful and not notice her. After taking a shower, Dong Lijia came down and saw a bunch of people in the living room. He was immediately speechless. "Why are you guys so free today? What are we doing here?" Deng Xinfei leaned against the sofa and looked at him without saying a word, but Luo Yuanjun was not as calm as him. She immediately jumped up, strode over, put her arm around Dong Lijia's neck and asked him, "I say, have you found a new lover recently? Do you know that you've given us the cold shoulder for several days? We agreed to go to Seaside City to have fun these 2 days. Have you forgotten?" When Dong Lijia heard this, he immediately remembered that this activity seemed to have been planned before the school holidays. What an exciting and refreshing experience it was to race on the green wooded road by the sea on a summer night. In the past, he could still think about these enjoyable things. But now he thought that the end of the world would come in more than 70 days. How could he still be in the mood to have fun? At this time, Lin Wenwen, who received the bodyguard's news that the gym was empty, was coming in from the back door and was about to go upstairs. But she heard Luo Yuanjuan's words. She froze for a moment because Dong Xinxin in her mind told her to stop. Dong Xinxin said to her, "Let's go too." Lin Wenwen glanced at the living room and asked her doubtfully, "Are you sure?" Dong Xinxin said, "Think about it. The life after the end of the world has made us fall into the despair and stress of survival. How can we go back to the current era of easy enjoyment? Anyway, we've all lived through the 7 years of the end of the world. It's better to let go of the end of the world first. Let's relax ourselves." Lin Wenwen heard the expectation in her tone and could not help asking, "Do you like the sea very much?" Dong Xinxin was silent for a while and said with a kind of regret, "I've never seen the sea with my own eyes. Every time I see it on TV or on the internet. Originally, I wanted to say that I would go to the seaside for my 18th birthday, but then I didn't have the chance. The end of the world came before she was 18 years old." Lin Wenwen was surprised. "You haven't seen it? Your family is so rich. I thought you should have been everywhere since you were a child." Dong Xinxin said, I was introverted when I was a child and didn't like to go far. When I grew up, my brother was busy with his studies, so I was the same. My parents were also very busy, so I never found a right time to go. Lin Wenwen thought for a while and then agreed. Since you want to see the sea, then go. Anyway, the sea after the end of the world could no longer have blue sky and white clouds along the coastline. After the end of the world, the sea was black and the sky was gray. There were all kinds of mutant plants on the beach and all kinds of mutant sea beasts in the sea. After Lin Wenwen stood for a while, he was soon noticed by someone in the living room. Xin Xin, you're here too. When Xin Jiao saw Lin Wenwen standing there in Dong Xin Xin's body, her eyes immediately darkened. Then she greeted her with a smile. As soon as she spoke, everyone immediately turned to look at the direction she was looking at. They saw Dong Xin Xin in a loose sportswear. The hair on her forehead was still wet and stuck to both sides of her forehead, and her face was flushed. One look, and it was obvious that she had just exercised a lot. Xin Xin, don't tell me you're like your brother and have a healthy body? Seeing her like this, Qin Jiao asked in surprise. Wow, Peng Xiaoxin, you actually know how to exercise? Are you going to fight with losing weight again? Tell me, how's the progress of the battle? How many pounds did you lose? Seeing her like this, Luo Yuanjun immediately let go of Dong Lijia and quickly moved in front of Lin Wenwen. He looked her up and down and asked in surprise. Although it sounded like he was mocking her, in fact, there was a trace of ridicule and disbelief in his tone. The rest was doubt and confusion, because when he looked at her, he didn't know if it was an illusion. Why did he feel that the Dong Xin Xin in front of him seemed to have lost some weight? Did he see it wrong? You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.